Okay, good morning. I'm happy this morning to be able to call a meeting to order. Wish we could all be present. Unfortunately, with these times, it's not a possibility, but happy to see all of you this morning. Thank you for your participation. Madam Director, you're first up this morning, so if you would, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. Great to see everyone and delighted to be with you this morning. And so I'm going to get right to my update. And as is, hold on one sec.
Winter.
Here we go. And they can see that too. Can they see the presentation? Not yet. Mr. Chairman, if you tell me when you can see.
I cannot see your presentation, but I have it before me. Are they going? There it is. It's coming up.
Mm-hmm.
All right, here we go.
See it.
As is typical, as of late, always been starting with the COVID update, and I think the commission knows while adaptations have been necessary, we continue to operate while dealing with COVID-19. I have to tell you, I've been so impressed with our ability as a team to continue to offer such a wide variety of virtual programming to the public. And we're continuing to conduct interviews for vacant positions and pay bills and complete trainings and even work through our budget business meetings, of which we had over 20 last week and survived that virtually. Our commitment to work through such challenging times to make meaningful impacts on conservation in Missouri through the implementation of our strategic plan is evident, and I'm just incredibly proud of the work our team's been doing to continue our fine work through COVID. Even while continuing to move the needle on our three primary goals, we are contributing to the science necessary to combat COVID-19. And so Sentinel testing has started for the department. We conducted it this week at both our Lost Valley Fish Hatchery and at Runge Nature Center. And so all of the deputies and I went through Sentinel testing this week and waiting to hear back today on that. The testing is key in the early identification of COVID-19 positives in the workplace to avoid sparks and spreading the virus. Additional MDC sites around the state will be identified for ongoing testing in the coming weeks and months. In addition, MDC has been working closely with the Office of Administration and our Department of Health and Senior Services on our vaccination plan for department staff. Our MDC team will all be included in what the state is referring to as phase 1B of vaccinations. And so as more vaccination doses arrive in Missouri in the coming months, our team will be tiered within phase 1B. So for instance, the protection division, because they mandatorily must deal with the public, will be eligible for tier 1 within phase 1B as emergency personnel. Then we have critical infrastructure staff who are congregated, and if one is sick, then it certainly impacts our ability to maintain those facilities. And so an example there would be hatchery staff and nursery staff. And so they're in the critical infrastructure tier, and then the rest of MDC will be prioritized after that. All team members will have the ability to decide, of course, whether or not to take the vaccine when it is available. All right, next slide. Final deer season numbers. So thankfully, COVID-19 did not stop hunters from enjoying nature during the fall and early part of winter. In fact, our deer harvest totals were up compared to the 2018-2019 season. That season, we were around 285,000 deer harvested. The 2020 statewide deer harvest summary is 296,515. As the commission is aware, deer hunting is big business in this state with over a $1 billion impact on the Missouri economy. Wanted to hit briefly on permit auto renewal. We are starting the second year of permit auto renewal by January of 2020. 24,000 customers had enrolled in the department's inaugural auto renewal service for annual hunting and fishing permits. Following the renewal process, over 21,570 annual permits were renewed for more than 18,200 hunters and anglers, totaling over 328,000 in sales. Now, as we approach the 2021 auto renewal process, an estimated 82,600 hunters and anglers have already enrolled in this auto renewal service. A quick CWD update for the commission. Working with hunters, meat processors, and taxidermist staff have collected to date 12,177 samples to test for CWD this past year. So the current sampling season starts with the fiscal year July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2021. These samples have resulted in confirmation of 22 CWD positive deer, with 21 of those occurring within the CWD management zone. Is the other one Pulaski, Mike?
Yes.
So Pulaski would be the new county there. Now that the deer hunting season is closed, MDC staff are working with landowners on a voluntary basis in the immediate areas around where recent cases of CWD have been found to remove additional deer, and this the culling goes on from mid-January through mid-March. Increasing harvest in areas where CWD has been found increases the chances of removing more infected deer. It's important to note MDC does not conduct targeted culling on a county-wide level, but instead is very targeted in these efforts within 1 to 2 miles of CWD detections. The exact size of the culling operation depends on the number of positives detected and where they're found. And a sincere thank you to all of the staff and landowners who are helping us manage CWD in Missouri. And our feral hog update. In the year 2020, the Missouri Feral Hog Elimination Partnership removed 12,049 feral swine from the Missouri landscape. In 2019, the partnership removed 10,495 feral swine. Our 2021 winter operation efforts got underway this week, and they'll continue through April 2nd. This remains a department priority, and again, appreciate all of the work of staff and the partners that have been involved in this effort to date. It is maybe not glamorous work, and there's no quick solution, but the work we are doing to protect Missouri's landscape and water and wildlife resources from this destructive invasive species is crucial indeed. And I believe the commissioners are all aware that the department did receive a grant for $1.5 million annually over the next 3 years, a total of $4.5 million, through the federal Farm Bill for feral hog elimination work in southern Missouri. These funds will be used to hire 4 University of Missouri Extension cooperative positions in southern Missouri that will work with landowners to develop landowner cooperatives to very focused on the elimination of feral hogs. So a common theme that I believe those of us who have had conversations with landowners and Missouri Farm Bureau chapters is that they felt that someone perhaps more local to their area would be more effective in developing landowner relationships and ultimately these landowner cooperatives. This also allows our staff to focus much more clearly on trapping efforts. In addition, the funds will be used to purchase pasture renovation equipment to help landowners repair damage caused by feral hogs, which has also been something that landowners have identified as a real need.
was actually 12,000.
12. We have a new total coming in on the feral hog elimination front, just so that you have the most up-to-date information. It is now 12,635 hogs. Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Jeffries. All right. What an amazing inaugural elk hunting season we had, with 5 of 5 hunters successfully harvesting bull elk during the firearms portion, December 12 through 20. Pictured here is Gene Gilkey with his 6x7 bull elk, and we are all, I know, all commissioners, all of us, incredibly excited about this and looking forward perhaps to the ability to celebrate a bit with our elk hunters in the coming months. And another accolade for our team, our efforts to continually improve how we make decisions as an agency in order to implement conservation. We hit another milestone on December 31st, when the department's comprehensive conservation strategy document was successfully uploaded to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and U.S. Forest Service's website. This officially marks the first time that a state fish and wildlife agency has ever submitted an integrated plan, meaning both our state wildlife action plan and the state forest action plan, as one document, one integrated plan to both agencies, and sets our revision timeline for both plans on the same 10-year cycle. So it has been years in the making, a lot of staff involved in getting us to this point, but a special thank you to the CCS Steering Committee for their hard work, and Nate Minix and Gus Raker for helping us bring this together into a single integrated document. And also a thanks to Doyle Brown for helping us get this submitted. The Center for Regenerative Agriculture, boy, we've had a lot of good press on this, and faculty at the University of Missouri are super excited about this. I think they had a faculty call, and lots of faculty members got on to learn more about where the university is headed with the Center for Regenerative Agriculture. So just as a reminder, the University of Missouri's College of Agriculture, Food and Natural Resources very recently announced the formation of the new Center for Regenerative Agriculture with the aim to increase soil health and biodiversity, conservation practices, and to contribute to overall sustainability and profitability of Missouri's lands. The department has provided a startup grant to help establish the center and to hire their program manager. And so we're also very excited about the work that is to come from this collaborative partnership of university faculty, staff, and students working with farmers, landowners, the public and the private sector organizations. A special thank you to Bill White, and I have to give a shout out to Max as well, because it was kind of his baby, for their commitment to service. But Bill will be serving as the department's representative for the initial advisory committee for the center. So very positive news there as well. A quick magazine report. Our communications branch continues to see success in increasing the number of magazine subscriptions. So far this fiscal year, we've seen a 2% increase in the number of subscribers to The Conservationist and a 2.7% increase in the number of subscribers to Explore. Overall, magazine subscriptions now totaling nearly 800,000. A shout out to Agent Andy Barnes. He recently received recognition by Governor Parson for his contribution to public service, receiving the Employee Award of Distinction. In addition to his work on the Geronimo case, Andy was recognized for his work accomplishments, which included over 1,000 resource contacts, 119 resource violations, 130 other violations, 96 arrests, 52 assisted arrests, 30, I mean, it goes on and on and on, over 1,200 public contacts. He's also certified 62 hunter education students. He made 600 instructor contacts. On top of this, he found time to conduct fishing clinics, and I don't know when he sleeps. It's a long list, but we're so proud of Andy and all the great work that he's doing to further our mission. Another agent shout out, this to Aaron Post. Corporal Aaron Post of Platte County was recently named as Missouri's Outstanding Conservation Agent for 2021 for his accomplishment and service to his community and conservation. In addition, Post was named MDC's Kansas City Region Agent of the Year, and his many achievements include providing swiftwater rescue training, successful cases made against wildlife violators. He had one particular case where he worked on for a number of years involving a taxidermist, which helping families ultimately regain possession of the wildlife that they had submitted to this taxidermist. Both of them joined MDC in 2006, so that was quite a class, but we're very proud of all our agents, but wanted to know these two in particular. Just wanted to hit that we're, even in the midst of COVID, we're working hard to fill several key positions. For example, our relevancy branch is in the process of hiring a hunting and angling marketing specialist. This newly created position under reorganization is often referred to by other state fish and wildlife agencies as their R3 coordinator. However, we changed the title to better reflect the job duties associated with our specific position. And they will include directing the recruitment, retention, and reactivation of hunters, anglers, trappers, shooters, and other wildlife enthusiasts. The selected candidate will work closely with staff in the education and communication branches to ensure we continue to move the needle on R3 efforts. In addition, Protection recently wrapped up second-round interviews for 16 conservation agent positions for this next class, so we're excited to get our new agents on board. What? We bumped it to 18. That's even better. So now we got 18. I just also wanted to give a special shout out to the entire HR team for not only working tirelessly to keep us informed of all the COVID-19 related closures and policy changes, but also for their amazing assistance in helping us fill vacant positions in alignment with the vision of the reorganization. It's taken a lot of work. It will continue to take a lot of work, and they deserve a huge shout out. Very quickly, at the national level, just a reminder that we did see some great wins with the last Congress, and that includes the Great American Outdoors Act. We've talked about that, of permanent and sustainable funding for the Land and Water Conservation Fund. It also included America's Conservation Enhancement Act, which was historic as well, and had some significant pieces to it that included reauthorizing the North American Wetlands Conservation Act and codifying the National Fish Habitat Partnership, also establishing a national chronic wasting disease task force, which finally we're getting our federal agencies and our state fish and wildlife agencies all working together to prioritize our efforts to combat CWD. So there really were some big wins. A few concerns or a few things that still perhaps left undone. We have to mention Recovering America's Wildlife Act. Fingers closed there that this will happen with this Congress. Work to do in the Farm Bill related to CRP. I think we're at the lowest levels of enrolled acreage that we've had in decades, so we've got work to do there. And then hopefully work to do on wetland protections that have been rolled back. And so those are some key areas that as a national conservation community, we're looking for progress in those areas. Finally, as we've been finishing off, just a moment to reflect on a couple of MDC history notes. It was 10 years ago, MDC staff, the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, and Kentucky Game and Fish started work on trapping elk in Hazard County, Kentucky. What an exciting conservation success story we have to tell today. Just know that it took a lot of years and a lot of people working to get us to this moment. So a shout out to all the folks involved in the restoration efforts. And in 1950, President Truman signed the Federal Aid and Sportfish Restoration Act, later called the Dingell-Johnson Act, into law. And in 1951, funds were distributed to states to invest angler tax dollars in state sport fishing restoration projects. Another wonderful example of partnership, this time between the federal and state levels of government. So it's all those little things we do every day that ultimately total up to big things for conservation tomorrow. So, Mr. Chairman, that is my report. If there are any questions, I would be happy to take them.
How about it, commissioners? Do you have any questions of the director?
Good report.
How about you,
All right.
Steve? Questions?
No, fine. Thank you. Report thorough.
Okay, thank you.
Should
Barry,
I
you have none.
want to introduce our, you tell me when you're ready for me to introduce our guest.
Please go forward and introduce Chris.
All right. Well, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, I had the opportunity to talk to the chairman at the end of last year, and just looking at 2021 in our commission meetings, and wanting to perhaps do a better job of highlighting bigger picture principles and programs and initiatives that have really shaped conservation in our country to date, and or will have significant influence on conservation going forward. So maybe doing a better job of hitting some high level principles, programs, and initiatives that really impact the work that we do. And so you have to start kind of with the core principle. And for us in this conservation community, it is the public trust doctrine. So I went to the leading expert in this area, who I heard, by the way, had recently done a similar presentation for South Dakota's commission and knocked it out of the water. No pressure, Chris. So absolutely delighted to introduce to the commission Chris Smith, who is the Western Field Representative for the Wildlife Management Institute. And WMI, as we call them, really is a national voice and a convener of incredibly important topics that affect conservation in our country. It's a private, nonprofit, scientific and educational organization dedicated to the conservation enhancement and professional management of North America's wildlife and other natural resources. Now, earlier in Chris's career, he spent 23 years with the Alaska Department of Fish and Game in various positions, and 11 years as deputy director, also of Montana Fish and Wildlife and Parks. You pick the beautiful states, don't you, Chris? Through his professional experience, Chris has developed a keen interest in the public trust responsibilities of state agencies and principles of good governance. And I know you've done quite a bit of writing on this topic as well. So Chris, welcome to the meeting. I'm going to turn it over to you, but we're really appreciative of your time this morning.
Well, thank you, Sarah, and thank you to the commission members. I wish I could be there in person. It's always much better to have these sorts of conversations face to face, but we'll see what we can do in this virtual setting. Hopefully, I'll be able to share my screen here, see if this works. All right. Can you see that?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Sarah, I'm not sure how to feel about being referred to as an expert, since the traditional definition of an expert is somebody with a briefcase from more than 50 miles out of town. I think in the modern era, it's more like somebody with an internet connection and a PowerPoint slide deck. But we'll see where it goes. What I'd like to do this morning is talk to you a little bit about managing in the public trust, both in terms of the public trust doctrine being this ancient doctrine, and also the modern imperative of managing public trust. Based on what I know of the Missouri Conservation Department, the folks that I've had the pleasure of working with there, and certainly listening to Sarah's remarks this morning, you guys are doing a great job. And so much of what I have to share with you this morning may be more of reaffirmation rather than any startling new information. But hopefully it will confirm for you that you guys are on an excellent path. Okay. So I wanted to start off by talk a little bit about what your job really is as commissioners. What is it that you do? And obviously the authorities that you have under the Constitution and statutes there in Missouri focus on things like conserving and managing fish, forests, and wildlife, acquiring and managing the property, hiring and overseeing the directors, setting seasons, bag limits, providing policy direction and strategic planning, and certainly providing fiscal oversight for the agency. But all of those things really are just sort of the tactics, the day-to-day things that you do. What you really, the most important role that you as a commission play is managing public trust. And by that, I mean managing the trust assets that are embodied by Missouri's fish, wildlife, and forests, and managing the public's trust in the Missouri Department of Conservation. The public trust doctrine applies to the first of those. That's the ancient doctrine. And the modern imperative is managing the trust in the agency. And both of those take active management. By way of background, I wanted to spend just a few minutes talking about what the public trust doctrine is, what it is and where it came from, what the role of government is in the public trust, under the public trust doctrine, as well as the role of your staff, and really focus on your role as commissioners in managing consistent with the public trust doctrine. When you think about this public trust doctrine, reflecting on the literature and the history, most public trust scholars identify the writings of Emperor Justinian as the origin of the public trust doctrine as a legal doctrine, an enforceable component of our law, when he declared that by law of nature, certain resources were common to all mankind, and specifically called out air, running water, and the sea, and the shores of the sea. And because the Roman Empire extended at one point all the way to Great Britain, which is the source of our common law in the United States, the public trust doctrine origin stems from that Roman law, but flows literally from Roman law through the Magna Carta and English common law, through the colonial charters that were granted when Europeans came to North America, and is embodied in and reflected in the basic fundamental laws, the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution in the US. Now, it's important to remember that the public trust doctrine, which is a legal doctrine, is largely a creature of common law, a result of court rulings rather than specific codified language. And I just want to touch on two of several Supreme Court rulings that were important in terms of establishing the public trust doctrine in the United States. The first of those was Martin v. Waddell. That was decided back in 1842, and it was based on a conflict between a landowner who claimed to own the tidal flats in front of his property in New Jersey, and tried to exclude anyone else from harvesting oysters on those tidal lands. And what the court determined was that the property under those navigable waters that had been held by the king, and when he transferred those lands to the landowner through a royal decree preceding statehood, that the king did not have the authority, King of England did not have the authority to transfer those property rights in as title lands to the landowner because he held them in trust for the public. And when the United States, or the colonies at that time, declared their independence, all of those trust obligations that had previously been held by the king became vested in the state. So the state took on the responsibility of managing those trust resources on behalf of the people. Another important case that deals specifically with wildlife is the case of Geer v. Connecticut. And in that case, the Supreme Court clearly stated that the state is responsible for managing, controlling, and regulating the common property in game animals, and that the power or control lodged in the state is to be exercised, like all powers of government, as a trust for the benefit of the people. So these two cases, along with several others, clearly establish a solid legal foundation for the state's management and administration of fish, wildlife, and in Missouri's case, forests, and requires that that management be undertaken as a trust is managed. Now, because the public trust doctrine is a legal doctrine, it's included in codified and case law, such as the two cases that I just mentioned. But it reflects a much broader philosophy that many of us who work in the field of public trust have come to call public trust thinking, which is broader than the legal doctrine. And the public trust thinking really is a philosophy about use and management of natural resources. And one of the things that a couple colleagues of mine from Cornell found in looking at natural resource management around the world and through time is that there are certain concepts to this public trust thinking, this philosophy, that are common across time, across space, and across cultures around the world. And the basic concepts or key components of public trust thinking are that certain natural resources are an endowment that must be stewarded, that they can't be simply exploited without regard to the future. Certain natural resources are not suited for exclusive private ownership. You know, we regularly divide up land and draw lines on maps, drive survey stakes, and grant fee title ownership to the surface estate or to the mineral estate underlying that. But the air that blows across that private land, water that flows across that private land, wildlife that move on and off those parcels are considered public property and not subject to exclusive private ownership. Under concepts of public trust thinking, all citizens deserve fair consideration in the allocation of benefits from the trust. Current decisions should avoid foreclosing future options. And the last two components here are that the trust administrators, the entity responsible for managing the trust and allocating the benefits, must be transparent in fulfilling their duty. And that citizens are entitled and in fact obligated to hold the trustees accountable to fulfill their responsibilities as trustees. Now, public trust management, it really, like the management of any trust, whether that's a trust for the benefit of your children or others, relies on three key components: assets, trust administrators, and beneficiaries. And you have to have all three of those components to be operating within the concept of trust management. So when you think about what are the assets in Missouri, in your case, for example, well, obviously that includes all of the fish, wildlife, and forests that you're legally responsible for, and maintaining those assets and the benefits that they can provide to the public is critical to your role as trust administrators. When we think about the other end of the process, the beneficiaries, who are the beneficiaries of the work that you do? And well, obviously the hunters and anglers and bird watchers, enthusiasts that enjoy the nature in Missouri quickly come to mind. But when you think about it, the scope of beneficiaries of the work that you do is even broader than that. You think about landowners, farmers, other folks who benefit from the way that the land and wildlife is managed in Missouri. Whether someone is actively engaged in use of fish and wildlife, they all benefit from the ecological services that the healthy landscape and healthy systems that you help maintain provide. And in addition, all the future generations of Missouri are part of the beneficiary base as well. What are the rights of those beneficiaries? Well, first of all, they have the right to demand that the trustees protect the corpus of the trust, to ensure that there is not any lasting damage done to any of those resources, to consider their needs and interests and provide benefits from the trust to the citizens of Missouri. Your beneficiaries also have responsibilities. Hopefully they will understand the public trust doctrine and their role in this process, that learn about the status of the assets and the potential benefits they can receive from that, express their interest to the trust administrators, but they also need to recognize the rights of their fellow citizens and hold trust administrators accountable to your duties and responsibilities. So let's focus in now on the role of the trust administrators and how the trust administration process actually works on a day-to-day basis. And most of the literature that you read on public trust refers to government as, in a fairly generic term, as being the trustee and responsible for management of public trust resources. But as I looked into this in more depth, starting about a decade ago, it occurred to me that thinking of this in terms of just government having this responsibility, or even thinking about the responsibilities of the legislative, executive, and judicial branch, was not the most helpful or insightful way to think about what the responsibilities are under the public trust doctrine. I came to the conclusion that the best way to think about the administration of the trust and roles and responsibilities is to think of trust administrators in two general categories. First of all is the trustees, and these are the elected and appointed officials within the state In your case, that primary responsibility falls to you as the commission and to the director. You are the folks who are most directly accountable to the citizens of the state. Now, I didn't include the governor and the legislature in this slide in Missouri, which I typically do in talking about elected and appointed officials, because even though under the Constitution, it's the commission that is authorized or charged with responsibility for management of those resources, I think it's important to remember and recognize that the governor and the legislature, also elected officials, have an important role to play in public trust management in Missouri. Each of you as commissioners was appointed by the governor, confirmed by the Senate. The legislature has a role in allocating your budget resources. And in a broader context, the legislature makes many decisions and controls a number of things that can have significant impact on fish and wildlife and forests that are beyond the authority of the commission. Same thing applies to local government to a certain extent, elected officials at the local level. You think about zoning ordinances, other land use authority that rests either in the legislature or in a county commission, for example. All of the elected and appointed officials have some role in ensuring that public trust resources are adequately protected. The other component of the trust administration and the other trust administrators are what I refer to as the trust managers. And those are the resource professionals, the folks that work for you, that do the day-to-day job, interface with the public, manage the resources, and provide you with the critical information you need to make your decisions. In terms of the responsibilities of those trust managers, obviously one of the most important things they do is monitor the status of the trust assets and identify potential benefits of the trust. And that may be anything from evaluating the status of your new elk population and identifying what a harvestable surplus might be from that, or assessing the health of forests and determining what sustainable harvest levels are of forest resources. The trust managers also need to be informing you as trustees, as well as the citizens of the state or the beneficiaries, of what their options are and what the potential benefits are available from those resources. And they play a key role in informing you as commissioners, as trustees, of the beneficiaries' interests. That doesn't take the place of public meetings or other direct input from beneficiaries and stakeholders to you as commissioners, but your staff can provide additional and more in-depth understanding of what beneficiaries' interests are. Increasingly, one of the key roles for your staff is facilitating dialogue among beneficiaries. When there are competing or conflicting demands for use of fish and wildlife or forest resources, your staff can play a critical role in terms of helping those beneficiaries sort out among themselves what the options are and resolving those conflicts before they come to you as win-lose decision. Then finally, it's important that your staff, that the trust managers actually manage the trust and provide benefits as directed by the trustees. Your responsibility as trustees is obviously to maintain the corpus of the trust and its ability to provide benefits in perpetuity, and consider the needs of all the beneficiaries, which can be incredibly challenging given the range of interests and demands on the resources, and obviously allocating benefits from the trust. The two important caveats related to that are that those decisions and allocations have to be consistent with the capacity of the trust and in consideration with competing interests. And one of the reasons that the decisions that you as commissioners make are so difficult is that you've got a wide range of information that you have to consider. The biological and ecological capacity of populations and forests or ecosystem, the technical feasibility of implementing a decision, and the economic feasibility, whether you can afford to do certain things, the legal mandates and constraints that you have, and the social values and the demands of the public. So all of those things interplay to make the decisions that you make extremely challenging. But all of that is basically what is summed up in terms of managing the public trust resources under the public trust doctrine. I want to shift now to spend just a few minutes talking about what I refer to as the modern imperative of managing the public's trust in the Missouri Department of Conservation. We're all fully aware of how public trust in government has declined over the past 40 or 50 years. And certainly the recent election season has demonstrated just how challenging it is to maintain the public's trust in government. But earning and keeping the public's trust really is critically important. It's the most valuable asset an agency has. It's very easy to lose trust and difficult to regain. Keys to maintaining that public trust are ensuring that you are honest, open, and fair with all interests in all the decisions that you make, and being reliable in terms of meeting expectations, both. And in that, I mean both following through on things that you commit to or decisions that you make, as well as not doing things that there is not a basis for public expectations. In terms of what can provide assistance to agencies in providing or maintaining the public trust through the work that you do, I worked with a number of colleagues several years ago to pull together the concepts of public trust thinking that we discussed earlier, along with modern expectations and good governance norms to create a series of wildlife governance principles. And these are 10 principles that are designed to help an agency ensure that they are applying strategic thinking and being adaptive as an organization, making evidence-based and broadly informed decisions, that their processes are inclusive and reflect diverse thinking, that they're operating in ways that are transparent and accountable, and that leverage their capacity for conservation. And if you'd like, we can get into more detail about what those governance principles are, the specific principles. But just as a way to illustrate that, how they relate to what an agency does, 3 of the principles relate to this theme of strategic thinking and organizational adaptability. And those three principles are that wildlife governance will be adaptable and responsive to citizens' current needs, produce multiple benefits, and will ensure that trust administrators are responsible for maintaining the trust. When you think about what does that mean in terms of day-to-day practice of an agency, strategic planning is a practice that can support those principles. And obviously, from reviewing the strategic plan that your agency has, you're clearly operating in a manner consistent with those principles. And what all that matters is with public trust, you can accomplish great things, and without it, you really can't accomplish much at all. And the last thing I wanted to talk about is just some of the current challenges that many state agencies face, and from the discussions that I've had and work I've done with Jason Summers and other folks in Missouri, you are seeing these challenges as well. One of those is figuring out how do you engage and serve broader constituencies? How do you ensure that all of the citizens in Missouri understand, appreciate, and benefit from nature and the work that you do? I really want to express my personal appreciation for Jason's work and others on your staff who are involved in development of the relevancy roadmap a year or so ago. And I want to commend Sarah and the agency for making the decision to establish a relevancy branch and really embrace that challenge. Another challenge that agencies across the country are facing is how do you sustain your relationships with your current constituents and not create fears that that you are abandoning the folks that brought you to the dance, as the saying goes. And the key there, I think, is just to remember that this is not a zero-sum game, that you are not leaving those traditional constituents, the hunters, anglers, and trappers behind, that you are, in fact, broadening the tent and bringing more people into the fold to provide support to the agency. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be glad to answer any questions. As I said at the outset, I think Missouri is by far a great example of fulfilling both public trust management of the resources and actively managing the trust the public has in the agency.
Chris, thank you for your presentation. Thank you certainly for what you do for conservation and trying to help steer those of us that are trustees in the direction that we need to go. How about questions? Anyone have questions of Chris?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
just one question, just to kind of, at the tail end of your slides, you mentioned our traditional constituencies, and then you also mentioned our broader constituencies, which I see as probably two different constituencies to some degree. And then early on in your slides, you talked about the consideration of competing interests. Could you correlate competing interests with traditional constituencies and broader constituencies?
Help me understand your question a little bit there. I'm not sure.
Well, the question would be, is there a consideration of competing interests between the broader constituencies and the traditional constituencies? Would you consider that to be a competing interest?
Potentially. There may be competing interests for time or use of land or resources. There are competing interests within any of those constituencies as well. You may have, for example, folks who are interested in non-hunting uses of your state forest lands at times or places where there may be the potential for conflict or competition between those non-hunting uses and hunting uses or trapping, for example. And so figuring out how to address those conflicting demands is one of the challenges that you'll face.
Okay.
Does that get at it?
Yeah, it does. It's, yeah, that's touching exactly what I'm thinking about. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Any other questions? Steve?
No, I'm fine. Thank you. Enjoyed the presentation, Chris.
Barry?
No, sir. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Very informative and very insightful.
Chris, thank you. Stay warm out there.
I will do that.
Is welcome in Missouri.
All right. Well, as soon as COVID is over, I hope to get there. My wife and I bought a travel trailer last year and have started doing some longer bike riding and would look forward to down in your country and doing some exploring of Missouri.
Well, we have wonderful state parks. I think maybe 88, some number. As you know, Sarah was director of the parks. And then we have some great trout fishing as well. But you're always welcome. Thank you for a wonderful presentation.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Next agenda item, fellow commissioners, is the consent calendar. Bye-bye. We have 3 action items in that. So I'd like to get a motion to approve unless someone has something they would like to remove, and it will be taken up last.
So moved.
And I'll second.
Second, any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Motion carried. Thank you. The next item is going to be rather long, so let's take about a 10-minute recess. Agenda item 4, regulations. Your reg committee report, sir.
All right. Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, and Director Pauly. The Regulations Committee met on January 4th for the annual review of the Wildlife Code. Today, I will present several action items from that meeting for your consideration. Mr. Chairman, before I begin my formal report, recall that during the December meeting, the Commission tabled recommendations related to Chapter 9 of the Wildlife Code regarding confined wildlife, with the request to bring the proposals forward again after further conversations with our stakeholders and partners. Mr. Chairman, I'm pleased to report continued cooperation, collaboration, and support from the interested parties affected by these proposed changes, and with your permission, we'll present them now as action items for your consideration.
Please do.
Thank you. Commissioners, as a reminder, your approval of these recommendations signifies the first step in the Department of Conservation's rulemaking process. Following your vote today, all proposed rulemakings will be filed with the Secretary of State's office. Following publication in the Missouri Register, the proposals will be open for a formal 30-day public comment period. Comments received on specific proposals will be compiled and presented as part of formal orders of rulemaking for Commission consideration at your meeting in May. Commissioners, included in your packet are the proposed rules and amendments to Chapter 9 brought forward by Protection Branch. These proposals were created with the following goals in mind: minimize behaviors that risk the integrity of the disease surveillance system and the health of confined and free-ranging cervids, ensure adequate disease surveillance across all confined cervids, both breeders and hunting preserves, design reasonable and accomplishable disease testing requirements, and to create clear, non-criminal consequences for non-compliance. To keep discussions organized, I'll introduce action items by topic, starting with proposed rules and ending with proposed amendments. The anticipated effective date of these changes is August 30th of 2021. The first set of proposed rules create a new Class 3 wildlife category, establish a Class 3 wildlife breeder permit, along with exemptions to said permit, establish the privileges and requirements of Class 3 wildlife breeders, and require all Class 3 wildlife breeders to conduct and maintain records associated with herd inventory that will facilitate the tracking of movement, disease, and deaths for each facility. Class 3 wildlife are defined as all cervids. However, permits to hold cervids in confinement will only be required of those species of Class 3 wildlife listed on the approved confined wildlife species list. Elk raised for human consumption and non-native cervids will remain exempt from permit requirements. Mr. Chairman, I request approval of 3 CSR 10-9.250 Class 3 wildlife, 10-9.352 Class 3 wildlife breeder permit, 10-9.354 privileges of Class 3 wildlife breeders, and 10-9.360 Class 3 wildlife breeders inventories and records required as described.
Fellow commissioners, you've heard the recommendation from the committee dealing with 4 of these changes. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye. Opposed, likewise.
Aye.
Carries. Thank you, Mike. You may continue.
Aye.
Thank you. The next set of proposed rules establish a wildlife exhibitor permit and the related privileges and records required. Mr. Chairman, I request approval of 3 CSR 10-9.370 wildlife exhibitor permit, 10-9.371 wildlife exhibitor privileges, and 10-9.372 wildlife exhibitor permit records required as described.
Commissioners, without repeating each of those, we've heard the report from the chair of the Regs Committee. May I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Motion.
Barry, second by Steve. All in favor, say aye. Opposed, motion.
Aye.
Please continue, Mike.
Thank you. The final proposed rule, 3 CSR 10-9.223 wildlife movement certification requirements, clarifies that all wildlife held or transported in confinement shall comply with applicable state and federal animal health standards and movement requirements, including requirement of a movement certificate issued by the Missouri Department of Conservation to transport Class 3 wildlife on the approved confined wildlife species list, which are mule deer and their hybrids, white-tailed deer and their hybrids, and elk and their hybrids, unless raised for food production and not commingled with mule deer or whitetails. The Missouri Department of Agriculture will continue to authorize movement of elk raised for human consumption and non-native cervids. This proposal also relocates restrictions on the importation, transportation, sale, purchase, giving away, disposing of specified species of wildlife from 3 CSR 10-9.353 privileges of Class 1 and Class 2 wildlife breeders to this rule. And it restricts the movement of eastern cottontail rabbits, swamp rabbits, and jackrabbits into Missouri due to the recent diagnosis of rabbit hemorrhagic disease in the United States. Mr. Chairman, I request approval of this proposed rule as described.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to that effect?
Yep, motion.
Thank you.
Second.
Second. Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye. Opposed, like.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commission. The next 3 proposals are amendments to 3 CSR 10-9560 licensed hunting preserve permit, 10-9.565 licensed hunting preserve privileges, and 10-9.566 licensed hunting preserve records required. These amendments create a hunt qualified status, require hunting preserves to obtain a Class 3 wildlife breeder permit if exercising the privileges of a breeding facility, and reduce the burden of current CWD testing requirements by allowing department-certified collectors to collect samples and by creating a tiered system of disease surveillance based upon past compliance and disease risks. Additionally, these amendments create an obligation by the licensed big game hunting preserve to maintain documentation from all cervid breeders providing animals to the facility that the animals were born within the state of Missouri. The amendment also clarifies that Class 3 permitted wildlife must originate from a Class 3 wildlife breeding facility and requires that all other cervids must originate from a facility enrolled in a state-sponsored CWD herd certification program. Mr. Chairman, I request approval of these proposed amendments as described.
Fellow Commissioners, may I have a motion to that effect? Thank you, Barry, and thank you, Steve.
Yes.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries. Next,
Commissioner, the final set of proposed amendments improve the organization of Chapter 9, reflect the creation of Class 3 wildlife breeder permit, remove wolf hybrids from the approved species list for Class 2 wildlife breeders, and modify the approved species list for Class 2 wildlife breeders to include only those black bears and black bear hybrids, mountain lions and mountain lion hybrids, and wolves legally obtained under a valid Class 2 wildlife breeder permit prior to August 30th of 2021. These amendments also clarify that permits to hold wildlife in confinement will only be issued for those species of Class 1 and Class 2 wildlife listed for each permit type on the approved confined wildlife species list. Finally, the amendments remove circuses, bona fide research facilities, and fur farms from the current exemption for compliance with confinement standards. Mr. Chairman, I request approval of 10-9.105 general provisions, 10-9.110 general prohibition applications, 10-9.220 wildlife confinement standards, 10-9.230 Class 1 wildlife, 10-9.240 Class 2 wildlife, 10-9.350 Class 1 wildlife breeder permit, 10-9.351 Class 2 wildlife breeder permit, and 10-9.353 privileges of Class 1 and Class 2 wildlife breeders, and 10-9.359 Class 1, Class 2 wildlife breeders records required, as described.
fellow Commissioners, with the recommendation from the committee.
So moved.
So moved.
Well, we had two make the motion. That's wonderful. Do we have any discussion? Any discussion?
No,
All
sir.
in favor, say aye.
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 Motion carries. Thank you. You may
Mr.
continue.
Chairman, with your permission, I'll move on to my formal report.
Yes, sir, please do.
The Regulations Committee met on January 4th, 2021 for their annual review of the Wildlife Code. Recommendations for 2021-2022 code changes were reviewed by the committee and are presented today for your consideration. Unless otherwise noted, the anticipated effective date of these changes is August 30th of 2021. Rules establishing season dates and limits will be filed as orders of rulemaking and will be effective February 28th of 2021. The first two proposals were brought forward by Science Branch and Protection Board. Changes to 3 CSR 10-4.111, endangered species, and 3 CSR 10-9.442, falconry, removed the peregrine falcon from the state endangered species list and allow master falconers to take and possess wild passage peregrine falcons for use in falconry in accordance with season dates and the annual allocation established by the United States Fish and Wildlife Service for Missouri. Mr. Chairman, I request approval of these proposed amendments as described.
Which one of you fine commissioners would like to make this motion?
Mr.
I'll
Chair.
make a motion.
Yeah, okay, second.
We have motion made and seconded. Any discussion
No,
about,
sir.
no discussion about the birds? All in favor, say aye.
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 Motion carries. Thank you. You may continue, Mike.
Science Branch also brought forward a proposed amendment to 3 CSR 10-4.135, transportation, to allow heads from deer harvested in the CWD management zone to be delivered to disease surveillance sampling stations within 48 hours of exit from the county of Harvest, except during the opening weekend in November portion of the firearms deer season, when heads must be taken to a designated disease surveillance sampling station as required. Mr. Chairman, I request approval of this proposed amendment as described.
About a
So,
motion.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion. All in favor, aye. Opposed,
Aye.
likewise. Motion carries. Thank you.
The next proposed amendment from Science Branch changes the required size of properties to enroll in the chronic wasting disease management program from 20 back to 5 acres. Mr. Chairman, I request approval of 3 CSR 10-7.439 deer chronic wasting disease management program, permit availability, methods and limits as described.
Mike, would you explain that, please?
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. When we changed our landowner acreage requirement a year ago, this also ended up changing the availability of CWD permits or tags, authorizations within our core CWD management areas. Inadvertently, we restricted the ability of folks in those core areas to help us with disease work on the reduction of CWD in those areas. This is just directly disease related and allowing more people who own property to participate in removing deer during targeted culling.
Very good.
As well as
Thank
the
you.
regular- Yep.
Thank you for that clarification. Do I have a motion, gentlemen?
So moved.
So moved. Second.
second.
The second. Any discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Carries. Please continue.
Thank you. The final two proposals from the Science Branch are amendments to 3 CSR 10-7.44, commercial game processing, permits, privileges, requirements, and 3 CSR 10-10.767, taxidermy, tanning, permits, privileges, requirements. These amendments add exemptions for cervid hides and specified cervid parts not returned to the patron from the requirement to be disposed of in a permitted landfill. Mr. Chairman, I request approval of these proposed amendments as described.
Fellow commissioners, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved. Second.
Discussion? All in favor, say aye. Opposed, likewise. Motion carries.
Thank you. Statewide Resource Management Branch brought forward the next 5 proposals involving common and grass carp. Amendments to 3 CSR 10-6.550, other fish, 10-6.605, live bait, 10-10.725, commercial fishing, seasons methods, 10-10.739, fish utilization permit, and 10-20.805, definitions, reestablishes the seasons, methods, and limits for taking common carp and grass carp, allows their use as live bait, authorize the selling of these carp to commercial establishments by contractors in a department contracted invasive fish removal project, and removes them from the invasive fish definition. Mr. Chairman, I request approval of these proposed amendments as described.
Who would like to make this motion on these carp?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion made and seconded. How about it? Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Please continue, Michael.
Thank you. Statewide Resource Management Branch also brought forward 2 proposals related to conservation area regulations. changes to 3 CSR 10-11.210, daily and possession limits, removes Otter Slough Conservation Area from the restriction of a daily limit of 15 crappie and puts the area under statewide daily and possession limits. The second proposal modifies 3 CSR 10-11.215 fishing length limits and establishes a 15-inch minimum length limit for black bass on Crowley's Ridge Conservation Area. If approved, these recommendations will be filed as orders of rulemaking with an effective date of February 28th of this year. Mr. Chairman, I request approval of these proposed amendments as described.
How about a motion, Barry?
You got it.
How about a second, Steve?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion, gentlemen? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye. Opposed, likewise. Motion carried.
Thank you. The last two proposals from Statewide Resource Management Branch remove Empire District Electric Company, Ozark Beach Recreation Area, from 3 CSR 10-12.109 closed hours due to the termination of their Community Assistance Program, or CAP agreement, and amends 3 CSR 10-12.110 use of boats and motors to allow boats without motors on Sedalia, Cloverdale Park Lake, and restrict boats to no wake speed on Watkins Mill State Park, Williams Creek Lake. These are areas under management agreement with the department. Mr. Chairman, I request approval of these proposed amendments as described.
Mark, would you like to make this motion?
Yes, sir.
Second.
Okay. Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, likewise. Motion carries.
Thank you. Thanks for bearing with us. We're getting to the end, Commissioners.
Thank you.
Proposed amendments to 3 CSR 10-11.186 waterfowl hunting were brought forward by the Regional Resource Management Branch. These changes remove the prohibition on waterfowl hunting from Lake Tahoe Conservation Area and removes Yellow Creek Conservation Area from a 1:00 p.m. closure for waterfowl hunting. Mr. Chairman, I request approval of these proposed amendments as described.
Who wants to make the motion about the waterfowl?
Make a motion.
Second.
Okay,
Second.
motion and a second. Any discussion, all in favor, say aye. Motion carries.
Aye.
Thank you. Please continue.
Thank you. The final proposal was brought forward by the Relevancy Branch. This amendment expands bicycle use on department areas by allowing bicycles on service roads. If approved, the anticipated effective date for this amendment will be March 1st of 2022. This is due, Commission, for staff needing time to, if you so approve, do the signage, make sure everything's updated, make sure our Atlas database is up to date, and so that the public knows which areas they can and cannot use bicycles on. Mr. Chairman, I request approval of 3 CSR 10-11.130 vehicles, bicycles, horses, and horseback riding as described.
Mark, you look like you want to make this motion.
Yeah. I want to make the motion and I have a question.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Okay, discussion. Please go ahead, Mark.
Can we use our little electric bike on these service
That's a
roads?
very good question, Commissioner.
It's the same question I had.
I had the same question as well. At this point in time, staff are not recommending moving forward with e-bikes, specifically because it's been very difficult for other agencies that have went before us, specifically the federal government and some of their regulation changes of determining how to define an e-bike and differentiate that from what kind of moves into some of the newer fangled motorcycle electronic vehicles that are out there. So we are looking at that, and hopefully we'll be able to bring a motion back in the future related to some kind of an additional expansion to what types of bicycles may be used on these areas.
Mike, is the reason, is the concern speed or noise or what?
I'm not certain what all the the concerns are, but going from a bicycle that is human powered to some of these more powerful electric vehicles would change speeds at which people were riding on these roads, where they could go, what they could do, and those kind of things. So I think we're stepping into the water. We're not jumping in head first.
Okay.
Let me offer.
Just to comment on that, I mean, some of the older individuals, it really opens up an opportunity for them to be outside or maybe handicapped or any different things. And I'd really like to look at that again if we can.
Yeah,
I
thank
agree, Commissioner, but we can still use authorizations for specific individuals to have those, to use those kind of conveyance devices on our areas when they do need them for health reasons.
Mike,
Yes, sir, Commissioner.
one thought might be, in having dealt with this in other areas, is that the electric bike, which has like a half horsepower motor, which is a battery driven, as opposed to a bicycle that has an internal combustion engine, which is basically a motorcycle.
Right.
So it's fuel driven, so that there is some dichotomy there between, there again, gas powered versus electrical powered. So give that some thought.
Certainly, Commissioner, and I agree. I think it's our goal to move that direction.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I do think that should be strongly looked at, because a lot of these electric bikes are in use now. And I think that it would be very good to look at that. And I would hope that it's intent of the commission to advise you to take this back and work it out, bring it back to the future commission.
Absolutely.
You've heard there's a motion and a second to it, and I think it's a very good discussion. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. You may continue.
Okay, Commissioners, the Regulation Committee has reviewed and reaffirmed support for new rules that would establish permit requirements, exceptions, and privileges for ginseng harvesters and dealers. These recommendations will be brought forward for your consideration at a future date. But there are no action items at this point. Today, I'd like to introduce scientist and state botanist Melissa Brigler to provide a presentation on ginseng. Melissa began working for the department in 2007 as a grassland botanist. In that position, she conducted research projects that included methods to control Serratia lespedeza, optimum seeding rates for prairie reconstructions, and vegetative impacts following patch burn grazing. Melissa assumed the position of state botanist in 2009. Her primary responsibilities include guidance and oversight of botanical components of the Missouri Natural Heritage Program and coordination of Missouri's ginseng program. She also serves as the department's plant expert and coordinates plant collection permits on lands owned or leased by the agency. Melissa, I'll turn it over to you at this point.
All right, thank you very much. I'm going to do my very best to kind of keep my eye up at the camera, so it does look like I'm looking at the commissioners and not at my computer screen. It's a little bit different situation than I've had to deal with in the past. I really appreciate your time this morning, and I'm pleased to be here and be able to talk a little bit about our ginseng regulations and some proposals that we think will help improve our way that we regulate the harvest of the species.
Thank you and welcome.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, very well.
Okay, and then is everybody able to see the screen on, it has a picture of a ginseng plant with some hands, okay. It should be switching over here in just a few minutes. Delay. It's a little surreal being back in this. About a year ago, I was speaking to the commission about a little bit more in depth on the background of ginseng harvest in Missouri and the history of how it comes in hand with the fur trade industry historically. And even today, a lot of our ginseng harvesters are current fur trappers too. And I won't be able to talk about that much today, but it was such a different situation. It was right before the COVID pandemic, so different world we live in. Are you able to see the screen yet? No? Okay.
Yeah, a copy of the hard copy,
Yeah, I've got a copy that Nicole sent.
which is
The
fine.
printout of the, oh, okay, okay. Well, we can go ahead and move on, and we can just follow the
Let's wait just a little bit because we're recording this.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Alan's coming through for us. Yep.
Okay.
There you go.
There it is.
Okay, so that is what the plant looks like, and it's easy to pick out when the berries are ripe. So you can see they turn bright red, and a lot of times when the berries aren't ripe yet, ginseng easily just kind of blends in with the rest of the flora in the forest.
I lost
It is hard to find. It looks like a lot of other plants too. A lot of hickory seedlings. A lot of people get tripped up by a hickory seedling. They think, oh goodness, it's ginseng. Or Virginia creeper is a very common vine in the woods. And I've had people call in and say, I've got acres and acres of ginseng. What do I do? You know, I was like, well, is it a vine? Is it growing up the trees? And they say, yeah, everywhere. You know, and then that's not ginseng. I'm sorry.
It's back up now.
Is it okay? Maybe I don't know if I should let it settle a little bit, or I think we're probably good to go. Okay, I got the go ahead. So, like Mike did mention, we have worked out some proposals for some revised regulations. But I think it is important to first touch on why we regulate it. Is everybody good? Okay, I thought I heard a question, but okay. I'll move on. So the Conservation Department regulates ginseng primarily because of an international trade agreement. And it's referred to as CITES, which is CITES, but that acronym stands for the Convention of International Trade of Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora, which is such a long name, that's why most people just call it CITES. And so it's this agreement among many different countries that have recognized that they do have harvestable resources that are a particular threat to becoming endangered due to international trade. So there's many different species. In fact, globally, there's over 35,000 species that are considered protected under this agreement. And so the countries that are included in CITES have agreed that they will abide by certain restrictions against the restrictions to help prevent those species from going extinct while still allowing international trade. So a lot of them are not really rare, but they could become rare if we don't keep track and keep regulating and sustaining that harvestable resource due to this international trade threat. So there's a lot of different countries involved in this, and the United States is one of them. Within the United States, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service regulates our CITES agreements, so they work directly with the individual states. And of course, for Missouri, that rests on the Missouri Department of Conservation. So the Fish and Wildlife Service makes sure that we are abiding by our CITES restrictions. We report to the Fish and Wildlife Service every year that, yes, Missouri has upheld our end of the bargain, so to speak. As long as the other states in the country have upheld theirs, then international trade is allowed to continue. And so we do work with Fish and Wildlife Service annually to ensure that Missouri is upholding our restrictions according to CITES. We do have several species in the state that have protection under this agreement. However, not very many are actually requiring us to regulate it in a specific way. So 3 species, bobcat, otter, and ginseng, are the ones that we do have to have specific regulations that abide by these restrictions to report to the Fish and Wildlife Service that, yes, we are agreeing to the CITES. We're upholding our end of the bargain and saying that our harvest and our trade from Missouri is abiding by the CITES restrictions. So this is something we have to report to the feds. And so for ginseng, the restrictions impose that we do have to assure that all plants are harvested legally, meaning that the harvest has to be regulated, and that we ensure that that harvest is sustainable. So every year we report to the Fish and Wildlife Service that We are continuing to regulate the harvested ginseng, and that harvest is continuing to be sustainable. If we ever failed to assure that we are allowing a sustainable harvest, then the Fish and Wildlife Service could prevent any trade, international trade of Missouri ginseng from happening. So Missouri ginseng could not be exported from the U.S. If we also just decided we don't want to regulate ginseng as a plant, we really don't want to deal with it, we're just not going to do it. And the Fish and Wildlife Service then would prevent our international trade from Missouri. So they would say that's fine, it all stays within the U.S., it's not going to be internationally traded because of the CITES agreement that the United States is in. So, and that makes ginseng a very unique situation regarding plants. It was interesting with the presentation this morning of the public trust doctrine, because a lot of times plants have kind of been sidelined in that public trust doctrine. All of our other plants are considered property of the landowner, which is very different than what animals are considered. There's a lot of botanically harvested or commercially harvested botanicals in Missouri besides ginseng, and those are not regulated. But because of the CITES agreement, that is what makes ginseng such a unique situation. And it is a very long-winded explanation of why we regulate ginseng, but that truly is why. It's because of this international agreement. I did want to also skip back, because we do regulate it, the Conservation Department did decide we do want Missourians to have that opportunity to internationally trade ginseng and harvest it in Missouri. So if we decided we didn't want to do that, then they would not be allowed to trade ginseng. And that would end up with that ginseng basically becoming essentially worthless from a monetary value, because virtually all ginseng is traded internationally. If it was kept domestic, it really wouldn't be worth very much money. So back in the early 80s, the Department of Conservation did say, we do want Missourians to have that opportunity to harvest that resource and trade it internationally. So this is our harvest data from since 1995. This chart shows the total amount of ginseng harvested each year in Missouri, and you can see that it is a concerning trend. So if this trend were to continue, it won't be too much longer. We won't even be able to see any harvest in ginseng if that declining trend does continue. We had in the mid-90s over 3,500 pounds of ginseng harvested in the state, and currently we're not even able to break 500 pounds of ginseng harvested each year. And that is despite an increase in value of ginseng. So while we've seen a decline in harvest, we've seen an increase in the national average of dollars per pound that ginseng brings. In Missouri, dealers usually pay between $400 and $600 a pound for ginseng. So this line indicates a national average. But it's a concerning issue that we have, and it's getting harder and harder to come to Fish and Wildlife Service every year and saying, oh, yes, we do have a sustainable harvest. And then we look at our harvest numbers, and it's not really showing an indication that we have that. The problem, though, is that it could be multiple different issues that are causing this decline, and we really don't know given our current regulations. So it could be that we are seeing just a decline in interest in ginseng. There's not many people that want to harvest ginseng, so that's why we're not seeing as much harvested as before. Or it could be truly that this resource is getting over-harvested and we're not able to regulate it in a sustainable way as with our current regulations.
Do you need to, if I might, do you need to relook at the reg if you think that it's over-regulated? Is that part of the reason for the decline?
Oh, I messed up. We are concerned that not that it's over-regulated, but that it's being over-harvested. And if it is truly being over-harvested, then we do need to determine some different regulations from that. So it's difficult to make that decision right now if it's truly being over-harvested or not. Or it could be other situations like we've lost some interest, and that's why we're seeing the decline. So we don't really know that it's over-regulated. We're concerned that it might be over-harvested. But again, that's a decision we just can't see given the current data that we have.
Do animals eat
Your
it?
question?
Do animals eat it?
Yes, deer love ginseng. I think deer love ginseng as much as people in Asian countries love ginseng. Maybe they know something we don't know, but yeah.
Oh, maybe
yeah.
more deer mean less ginseng.
Maybe so. Yeah. There's been studies showing that deer do definitely target in on ginseng too. Yeah.
What about
Are
feral
there other
hogs?
questions? Oh, well, feral hogs will get anything. Yeah, especially in the, yeah. The ginseng habitat correlates to an area that they would probably seek out during those really hot, sticky days in the Ozarks. They go down into the low areas where ginseng exists. So feral hogs do certainly pose a threat to ginseng and about everything else. So.
Melissa, is there currently a permitting system now? I mean, what's the trend if there is, and how many permits are being issued?
Well, so currently, if you look at the top part of that slide, our current rule for harvest regulations are that there is a harvest season of September 1st to December 31st. We do have a minimum harvestable size. So ginseng leaves are kind of like buckeye leaves, or like the palm of your hand, where you have small leaflets on your hand. You know, there's 5 different leaflets per true leaf. So each true leaf is considered a prong, so this rule is it has to have at least 3 true leaves. And what that rule ensures is that the ginseng plant that is being harvested is that it is most likely at least 5 years old and been able to produce a seed, at least one. So theoretically, we're preventing people from pulling plants out of the ground before they've had the opportunity to produce seed. And those 2 regulations, the harvest season and the 3-prong rule, are nationwide. All states agree to those rules. In Missouri, you also, of course, have to have landowner permission. Most public landholding agencies do not allow ginseng. I haven't found any ginseng harvest. The Conservation Department has not allowed ginseng harvest since we've been regulating it. And any of the major, public landholding agencies do not allow ginseng harvest. It's mostly on private ground. And anybody
So how many permits?
What's that?
Well, how many permits a year are being purchased through the department?
We currently do not require a permit to harvest ginseng. And that is what one of our proposals would include, is a permit to harvest ginseng. So currently, as long as you're following these rules, anybody can harvest ginseng, as long as they have the private landowner's permission, or the landowner's permission. As long as you're out there in the right season, you're digging 3-prong plants, and you've got permission to be there, you don't need to do anything else. That's it. What we're proposing to do is implement a permit structure. So that would include a $20 Missouri resident permit. For non-residents, it'd be a $150 permit to harvest ginseng, and then that would include a Missouri landowner exemption. So a landowner that had ginseng on their property would not be required to purchase a permit to harvest that ginseng. There is a bit of a caveat with that, is that if the landowner if that person wanted to keep it for their own use, they wouldn't have to do anything extra as far as getting a permit or anything. But if they wanted to sell it, or if they wanted it to give it to their neighbor or their family member or whatever, they would have to either get a landowner harvest authorization number or certify that ginseng. And that is not necessarily for the landowner, that's for the dealer that's going to be in possession of that ginseng, or the friend or cousin or whatever that's going to be in possession of the ginseng. They're going to need those numbers to show that they didn't poach that ginseng. I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in just a bit. But what this permit structure is going to do that we don't have access to now, first of all and foremost, we're going to be able to determine, is our harvest actually sustainable? Are we accurate in telling the Fish and Wildlife Service, yes, Missouri's ginseng harvest is sustainable and approved under CITES rules? Right now, it's getting harder and harder to go to the Fish and Wildlife Service every year and say, yeah, sure, it's sustainable. Well, it's declining quite a bit every single year. So we need to know why. And going forward, having this harvest permit structure will give us the information essential to be able to assess whether or not we're seeing a decline in interest, or are we truly seeing an overharvest in the species, and do we need to be doing some more efforts to ensure the sustainability of the harvest? Truly right now it's just a big unknown. Fish and Wildlife Service hasn't pressed this too hard yet, but it's not going to be far into the future. They're going to be hitting on Missouri saying, we're seeing something disturbing here, and how much longer we're going to be able to ensure our citizens that they can internationally trade ginseng is a big question right now. So we need more information, and that's what this permit structure is going to do. It's also going to help us enforce our current regulations. So currently, there is zero accountability for who is digging ginseng. Somebody that digs ginseng goes into a dealer and sells their ginseng, and it could be, you know, a bucket full on the first day of harvest season. The likelihood of that person actually doing that in one day is very, very minimal. I'd probably say even impossible to do that. But there's no way we can follow up with them. So the dealer only has their name, and everybody knows you can just make up a name, and then they're gone. They got their money and they're out of there. So there's very little accountability. Poachers know this, and so it's a very high-risk situation because we don't have this permit structure in place. And then as far as the landowner exemption, so currently with the proposals that we brought forward to the Regulations Committee, it would include that the landowners do still have to abide by the current ginseng regulations. So they would still have to follow everything they have to be doing now. They have to, you know, follow the harvest season, the three-prong rule, the certification requirements, but they would not have to do that extra step of buying a permit to dig ginseng on their own property. So after that ginseng is harvested, they could either decide to keep the root, and then the only thing they'd have to do is the current thing they have to do now is if they were to hold that root beyond March 15th, they'd have to have that certified by an agent. And I think I might have skipped over that a bit, but that March 15th rule there is so that, and again, it's for everybody, and it's been this way for many decades, is that as spring is coming on, you harvested your root, you kept it all winter, and now spring is coming on, and then summer, and then fall, even before harvest season. If someone is in possession of that root beyond March 15th during the growing season of ginseng, but before the harvest season, they have to have a certification slip to show that they were in possession of it the year prior. So they didn't dig it up yesterday. They have a certification to show that. So that's the reason behind that March 15th date. And again, it is applied for everybody. So then that dealer could decide to do that, keep it for their tea or personal use or whatever. If the dealer did want to, I'm sorry, I'm saying dealer, if the landowner wanted to keep it, that's all they'd have to do is certify that ginseng like everyone else, and like that person has always had to do. If the landowner wanted to sell it to a dealer or to give it to somebody, that landowner would have to contact the conservation department and attain either a landowner harvest authorization number, that would be for the dealer, and this would be free. It's just something the dealer's going to have to purchase that ginseng. Or they would have to go ahead and certify it in order to give it to somebody, to give it away. So that's the landowner exemption, really not anything in addition to what this landowner would have to be doing anyway. Just calling the conservation to get a number is really the only extra step the landowner would need to do. So that's kind of the harvest side of things. We've also got the dealers. So the dealers are the ones that buy and sell ginseng. So I can go out and dig ginseng from the woods and sell it to a dealer. That makes me a harvester. But if I wanted to buy ginseng from somebody and then sell it to somebody else, that makes me a dealer. And we have to have dealers register with us and submit quarterly reports. And those are essential and required by the Fish and Wildlife Service because we have to have an account for how much ginseng leaves Missouri every year. Again, that's a federal requirement. And we don't have too many dealers in Missouri, usually between 12 and 16. Right now we have the most I've ever had to deal with, which is 16. But dealers in Missouri, some of them buy a lot more ginseng from other states than they ever were able to purchase from Missouri. And when we look at our data, the total amount of ginseng that is purchased in Missouri is purchased by Missouri dealers. It equates to a lot more than what is the amount of ginseng we harvest in the state. So this chart shows the blue portions of those bars. These are the total amount of ginseng purchased each year by Missouri dealers. And you'll note the scale. So the scale of our harvest amounts is much less. There's some extra zeros on this chart. So, we've got a high point of 35,000 pounds of ginseng was purchased in 2013. We've seen a decline recently, so we're not even reaching 5,000 now, but we're talking not even 500 of that was actually harvested in the state. By far, and a lot of ginseng, a big amount of ginseng is coming into the state by Missouri dealers. So this data really did inspire actually a federal investigation and involved other states, not just Missouri, but they did focus on Missouri dealers because of the amount of ginseng not necessarily harvested in Missouri, but the amount of ginseng that was being purchased from other states and funneling through Missouri. So this federal investigation I mentioned, it had occurred they looked at data, ginseng dealer data from 2010 to 2013. This map shows in green the locations of Missouri dealers, and the blue locations are where that ginseng was purchased from. So they were purchasing some from Missouri, yes, but by far they were purchasing the most, and this was that year that we had included 2013, which was a really large year. They were purchasing a lot from these out-of-state locations. And then what the dealers were doing is then selling it to larger dealers. Some of those were within the United States. So this is for a markup. Each time, they buy the ginseng and then they sell it to larger dealers for a bigger price. The red locations are the locations where the dealers were selling their ginseng to. So they purchased it from out of state in Missouri and then they sold it out. And then those larger dealers sell it direct overseas. 99.99% of ginseng all goes to the overseas market. Very little of it stays domestic. The real markup is when you get to the direct sales of overseas, if you can sell direct. So these are the locations where Missouri dealers were selling direct from Missouri to the overseas market. And the investigation came up with some amounts. We never really get the dollar amount. We just get the amounts of the weight of what gets sold and what gets moved from Missouri. But they found that between 2010 and 2013, Missouri dealers sold almost 350,000 pounds of ginseng to Taiwan. To Singapore, it was almost $1.5 million value of ginseng to Singapore, and then over $5 million from Hong Kong. So a massive amount of activity is going on in Missouri regarding ginseng. Even though we're on the edge of its range, we don't have that much in the state, but a lot is coming through the state. And a lot of this was due to illegal activity. There was a lot of fraudulent record keeping. And a lot of it did have to do with our lax regulations. So when it came to tracking this ginseng, it became very difficult. It was very easy to hide batches of ginseng that were being sold and purchased and moved through the state, and given our current regulations. And then also successfully prosecuting these convictions. Whenever people were prosecuted, it was very difficult to be successful in those prosecutions because we had such lax regulations regarding the dealers. Our current regulations then are that we have an annual registration. That is a simple form that you just fill out and send in, and basically tells me who you are and it helps me know who I need to be contacting for quarterly and annual reports. Once they're on that registration list, and it's an annual registration, they do have to submit then quarterly reports of all their transactions of all ginseng purchased and sold, and then an annual report, inventory report, so we know how much ginseng they held over. And like everyone else, they have to have that, abide by that March 15th certification rule. Well, our proposal, though, is to implement a permit structure for dealers, too. And that would be a $100 resident permit for Missouri dealers to a $100 resident dealer permit. So a Missouri resident would have to pay a $100 fee for a permit annually. And then for a non-resident dealer, it would be a $300 permit. And then also routes purchased and sold from a dealer to a dealer, we have proposed to require that ginseng be certified. That would specifically address the issue of not being able to track ginseng from dealer to dealer, because that's something that came out through the federal investigation, is that this ginseng transactions were being hidden. They were reporting less in some cases than what they actually bought, or more. It was very difficult between dealers because they would batch up ginseng together and sell it to one dealer, and that dealer would batch up some more together and then sell it to another, and it became very difficult to track. So that would solve that problem. And then with the permitting structure, we would be able to have better successful prosecutions when these issues do come up again. And then just a few more proposals to touch on. We'd also like to implement a certification fee. So our current rules are that, again, that March 15th deadline, it has to be certified. And then also if ginseng leaves the state, no matter what date it is, if you want to take your ginseng that you harvested to Illinois and sell it over there, you have to have it certified before you leave the state. And again, that's a federal rule, and we have to ensure that we get a total account for how much ginseng is left Missouri. Or harvested in Missouri. And that's for the federal annual reports that are required. So That's the current situation, and it does involve each time a certification occurs, an agent visits the person that wants to have ginseng certified, and that agent then has to weigh the ginseng, fill out the form, and if it's more than a pound worth of ginseng, they have to count roots to what the number of roots in each pound is. It's actually just an annual or a random sample of a pound, and they have to count how many roots are in that pound. Again, that's a federal regulation. So it takes time, it takes quite a bit of time. What we're also seeing coming up is that we have an increase in the number of smaller amounts for ginseng to be certified. So instead of one dealer saying, okay, here's my inventory, come on out and fill out the certification slip and I have it all certified, instead they're batching it into smaller pieces and selling them over the internet. So, which is great for the dealer because they get a better markup, and it's great for a harvester. A harvester can do that too. But an agent would have to come out, instead of filling out one slip, this agent now has to fill out 16 slips. So it takes more time. I serve on a couple of working groups coordinated by the Fish and Wildlife Service, and that is becoming an issue with other states. And they were actually surprised that Missouri has not seen that problem. That occurred a couple of years ago. We are now starting to see that problem. It's kind of like, gosh, until you said something, I didn't know. But once that started becoming aware, and then it's like, yep, in the last couple of years, we've seen that pop up too. The chart there shows the number of certifications for ginseng batches less than a pound. So these aren't total certifications. These are just the smaller certifications. And we're seeing that number of certifications increase. And the year for 2020, since we haven't hit that March 15th deadline yet, we're still seeing that number increase as well. So because of those reasons, we would like to implement a $25 certification fee. So each time somebody needs to have ginseng certified, it's going to cost $25. Hopefully that will minimize that activity. Hopefully it doesn't get so many certifications we need that money to recoup our costs, but it is an expensive thing to have to do. And we feel that the $25 certification fee would be the wisest approach to handle that situation. And then finally, the last rule to talk about would be looking at wild versus cultivated ginseng. So currently our regulations specify the harvest of wild ginseng. But whenever we refer to the commerce, buying and selling of ginseng, or the certification of ginseng, it refers to all ginseng. And that again is required by the federal government. What becomes an issue is whenever somebody would be harvesting the ginseng, say out of season, or their small plants are only 1 or 2 prongs. Someone could just say, well, this wasn't wild ginseng. This was planted by my grandpa when I was a child, so it's not wild. So it creates this massive loophole that somebody can just claim, yeah, it's not truly wild because it was planted. And there's such a gray area between cultivated ginseng and a wild ginseng. If an agent could simply tell the difference between the two, there would not be a problem, but they cannot. It looks virtually identical. And I do have a photo here of a planting in Pennsylvania. I have not seen any plantings like this in Missouri or heard of them. There have been some agroforestry interest in that and saying, you know, let's plant these ginseng. It does, to my knowledge, this type of situation does not work well in Missouri. We just don't have the climate appropriate for it. What does work, from what I'm told, is that planting ginseng, you know, like your grandpa planted it and here it is. And I don't know how many stories I've heard about how Daniel Boone planted the ginseng I harvest and all this stuff. So apparently it works, according to many people I've talked to. And the problem is, though, it is treated just like wild until you go to the regulations. And suddenly it's like, oh, no, that's planted. But I will say in the last, just looking through our harvest data, and just taking a time frame, you know, it's random. It's always been minimal. But let's just say in the last 5 years, less than 1/100% of ginseng has been claimed as being cultivated. So that's every time it's sold to a dealer, every time it's been certified. 99.99% of ginseng in Missouri is always claimed to be wild. So what we would like to do is simply drop off that wild from the harvest regulations. So it would regulate all ginseng. However, what that would do, though, is to say, well, okay, I bought these seeds off the internet, I planted them out on my property, and now you're going to tell me, now if you have your private property, you don't need to buy a permit, but you're going to tell me now I can't pull those plants up until it's September 1st and I have to wait till it has 3 prongs. And the answer to that question would be yes. The reason being is that we just simply cannot decipher the difference between wild and cultivated. So that is the final proposal. I hope I didn't go too far over. This is just a slide that shows everything I just brought up. The harvest regulations are on the left side of your screen. The proposals, I'd say, are proposed revisions. And then on the right side of the screen is the proposed revisions for ginseng dealers. And that does include that $25 minimum certification, although that would be required if you're a dealer, a landowner, or a permit holder, if you wanted to certify your own ginseng. If you get rid of it before March 15th, you don't have to certify it, but that's what that would be for everybody. And just the final, point to reiterate is we are doing this because it is essential. I mean, the people that work with ginseng harvest in Missouri strongly feel that it is essential to be able to continue to tell Fish and Wildlife Service we are allowing the renewable, sustainable harvest of ginseng. Currently, it's getting to be a very difficult thing to say out loud without thinking, gosh, I just don't know. We just really don't know right now. And these are necessary changes if we are going to be able to ensure the sustainable harvest. With that, I take any questions.
Thank you, Melissa. Questions, please, Barry. You're muted.
What's ginseng used for?
Well, it's almost all exported. And last time I was able to show this really neat picture of a historic massive pile of ginseng. Very little of it stays in the United States, but it's mainly exported to Asian countries. And it truly is a traditional medicine belief that ginseng, because a really nice root looks like a man. So it gets gnarled branches and everything, and it looks like a really nice one, and one that would be very valuable. It looks like it even has arms and legs and everything. And so if you remember, about Signature's doctrine, where if something looks like something, that it must be good for that purpose, like the eye of a carrot. So that makes you think, oh, carrots are good for your eyes, or this mushroom looks like an ear. It must be good for your hearing, And so ginseng has really been developed over centuries as a belief that it is just good for everything, your entire body. There has been no modern medical studies that have proven that to be a fact. But it is still a very strongly held belief that ginseng is just good for your overall health. I mean, I could go down a whole list of things, but it really does include just, circulation, stamina, it's just everything, memory.
But
very little stays here.
But just for a man, not for a woman.
Yeah, well, yeah, and depending on what that ginseng root looks like, sometimes it is more highly valued sometimes for that reason. But yeah. So no, it's for everybody,
Okay.
Not just a man. Yeah, even though it does look like the root of a man or a woman. You're correct. Yeah, a human being. Yeah.
Good. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a couple for you, Melissa. I believe there's 19 states where ginseng is being harvested in, and obviously, since we don't have a permitting system, we're looking for some way to evaluate, is it participation or is it harvest? Of those states, numerous ones do not require a permit like it's being proposed. So what are those states doing? And I think Arkansas, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana doesn't require a permit. What are they doing to evaluate harvest trends? What's going on, the health of that?
Yeah, and I mentioned earlier, I do serve on some working groups that are coordinated with the Fish and Wildlife Service, and those states are included. So I'm a representative from Missouri, and then we have the representatives from the other states. I have not heard a single state say, gee, we don't want permits. From a ginseng harvest standpoint, of course, there's probably other people that represent that state that do not want the harvest permit. Their big hang-up is they have to go through their legislature in a much more complicated and daunting process is what we have in Missouri. And I've had so many people tell me, you are so lucky to be in the situation you are in, where it is at least a achievable goal is to be able to try to implement a harvest permit structure. In fact, so So the Fish and Wildlife Service has the Division of Scientific Authority under CITES. So CITES, there's two branches. Division of Scientific Authority is one of them, and they set they're the ones we have to report to. So the conservation reports all of our ginseng harvest data and everything. They have they haven't gotten there yet, but they are close to, in addition to telling all of the states that, you have to abide by these regulations we've been abiding by forever, you also have to implement a harvest permit system. We're not there yet. I expected to be there by now, but, of course, with everything going on, it hasn't happened. But it is definitely supported and something that other states wish they could accomplish too. They don't have that, and I think it's probably just over time, it's become more of an issue. Back 30 years ago, part of it is a little bit of a plant. Let's do the absolute minimum we have to do because we don't really regulate plants, so let's just do that. And it might end up changing to where our minimum just got bumped up a bit. It would be nice if Missouri was already a step ahead of that game, and we've already addressed that issue. But yeah, they do not have a harvest permit structure. Some states do not, but I can tell you they wish they did. The ginseng coordinators in those states wish they did.
Well,
And the Division of Scientific Authority wishes they did.
but just in consideration, I don't want to take up any more time, but, as a private landowner and, harvesting an agricultural product and having to pay for it. I mean, last year, somebody posted a fictitious post on Facebook that we were starting to charge permits for morel mushroom harvest, and we absolutely got crucified on it. And I could see a repeat on this very quickly, but it would actually be real. And it's just a real concern as a private landowner and allowing someone to come on my land. And particularly when I start looking at, adjacent states that don't require, permit fee. And then also Iowa and Wisconsin do require permit, but it's probably half of what we're proposing. So there's some areas here that are just really concerning from a public perception of what we're doing as a department.
Our permit structure, the pricing aligns somewhat with the fur trapping. So because there is such a connection there with fur trapping and ginseng harvest, we've kind of aligned with that. Now, it's only a $10 permit for fur trapping, but that $10 has been in place for, I don't know the year, but at least 20 years, maybe more than 25 years. A couple of decades, it's been $10. So in expecting that hopefully we would not have to be changing these regulations anytime soon, and that price is going to be in our code book. The $20 will take up it will still compare with our harvest permits for fur trapping, but also a little bit more because it's been that price for so long. But then hopefully we won't wish we had asked for more down the road. And part of the pricing too, it could be a free permit, and we've talked about that before. The problem sometimes in getting free permits or permits that are not very high in fee amount is that whenever you do end up actually catching somebody violating, you're harvesting ginseng and you didn't buy a permit, and then that case that goes before a judge, it becomes more of a difficult a way to successfully prosecute that if they didn't charge a fee. And that is kind of the difficult truth sometimes too, is it is easier to enforce regulations with a fee attached to it. And so that's part of the reason that we do have that fee. And why it is $20, we could talk about that further and explore perhaps reducing that, but that is why it was set at $20, just to kind of compare similar to what we have with fur trapping.
Okay, thank you.
Seemed like there was something else I was going to touch on about the landowners, but I kind of forgot. Oh, I did want to point out too, is if we do fail to uphold these CITES regulations, the landowners and anybody else in the state is no longer going to be able to trade ginseng. So that's something. The unfortunate case with, we're just going to have to do a good job at communicating, because the CITES restrictions are difficult to understand for people that are not very familiar with them. So it is a long-winded, kind of explanation of why is ginseng so different? Why are you picking on ginseng? We're not, and it's because we have to abide by this. This is in order for ginseng to leave the United States, it has to be regulated, and that's not our rules. You know, that's the Fish and Wildlife Service and the international agreements that we've made. So it will be a challenge to keep that communication open. Again, like the public trust doctrine, we're going to have to be transparent and open about why we are making these changes and why it's necessary.
Melissa, thank you for a good report. Very interesting.
Well, it was a pleasure.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments from anyone? Thank you, Melissa.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I guess I'm going to be a little bit rude going forward because it's 10 minutes to 11, and at the rate we're going, we'll be here at 3 o'clock. So I'm going to ask all presenters to get to the point as quickly as you can. And if I cut someone off, please understand why. Mike, you want to make the next introduction?
Yes, and I'll do that very briefly. Commissioners, the Regulations Committee's also been evaluating the potential proposal to establish a minimum length limit of 26 inches for blue and flathead catfish on Mark Twain Lake. With that, I'll introduce Fisheries Management Biologist Ross Dames, who's here today to provide some background on that topic. Ross has been with the agency for a number of decades and has been up in this area for most of his career and has a lot of good insight background and will help walk us through the rationale and how we got to this point. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ross.
Thank you, Mike, and good morning to everyone. Are we seeing the screen?
Not yet.
Picture of a big blue catfish.
Not yet.
Okay.
That'll pop up on your computer though.
We got it?
Got it.
Okay, yeah, so I'm here today to share with you our recommendation to implement a new minimum length limit for blue catfish and flag catfish in Mark Twain Lake. And perhaps just importantly, to share with you the process we used to get to this recommendation. First, a little bit of background about Mark Twain Lake. Mark Twain Lake is located in Rawls and Monroe counties in the Northeast region. Congress authorized construction of the lake all the way back in 1938. Construction of the dam, Clarence Cannon Dam, started in 1969, and the lake was almost filled by the end of 1983. We call Mark Twain an 18,600 acre reservoir, but in reality, that surface area varies a lot depending upon water level, so it can be anywhere between 14,000 and 35,000 acres. Mark Twain is Missouri's largest reservoir north of the Missouri River, and it is operated and managed by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and they are part of the St. Louis District. Congress authorized construction of Mark Twain for the primary purpose of flood control, but hydropower and water supply.
Not sure necessary.
Fish and wildlife management and recreation are also authorized purposes. Are we still seeing it?
It's coming back.
Okay. Mark Twain is one of our most popular crappie fishing reservoirs. Creel surveys back in the early 2000s indicated that most of the fishing at Mark Twain was directed toward crappie. We don't really know how much catfish fishing effort there is at Mark Twain. Our creel surveys don't capture catfish fishing very well, and we haven't had any of those in a long time, but it's been my observation over the last 24 years working on the lake, and that of many of our conservation agents that have been around a long time, that catfish fishing pressure is increasing, and that's probably true at most of our reservoirs, just based on the amount of gear and hooks they see in the water. In fact, our conservation agents and many of our anglers have expressed some concern about that, especially when they couple that with declining success, especially for flathead catfish. But Mark Twain does support popular sport fisheries for blue catfish and flathead catfish, but very little was known about these populations before we completed our assessment over the last few years, or about their exploitation by anglers. And you'll hear me use this term exploitation interchangeably with fishing mortality. It simply means the portion of the population that is harvested by anglers every year. It's an important measure to know in our most important sport fisheries like catfish fisheries in our big reservoirs. Current regulations include the statewide regulations, which is a 5-fish daily limit for both blue catfish and flathead catfish, and no size limit. So initiate an assessment of these populations in Mark Twain in 2012. Paul Michalitz is a resource scientist, recently retired, was the lead investigator. I was a co-investigator. And so we had, with the study, we had 3 primary objectives. We wanted to determine blue catfish and flathead catfish population demographics, so like the numbers and sizes of fish, how fast they grew, and their mortality rate. We wanted to estimate the exploitation by anglers, or how much harvest occurs due to fishing. And then we wanted to determine if there are any new harvest regulations we could use to improve the quality of the fishery. In other words, could we have more and bigger fish while maintaining satisfactory amounts of harvest? Unfortunately, we couldn't catch enough flathead catfish during our pilot sampling in 2012 and 2013 to complete an assessment. We tried several methods, couldn't catch many fish with either of them. So either our methods just aren't effective in Mark Twain Lake, or the density of flathead catfish in the lake is just very low. We use methods or tried methods that work in other places. So it's my belief and Paul's belief, especially after talking to our anglers, that we're probably dealing with this low densities of flathead catfish in the lake. Regardless, we had to exclude them from further evaluation. So we caught blue catfish from 2012 to 2018 using jug lines baited with gizzard shad. This is a method that worked the best, and is the same method that most anglers who target blue catfish in our reservoirs use. We measured all the blue catfish that we caught. We weighed some of them. We also removed the pectoral spine from some of the blue catfish so we could determine their age. Determine their age allows us to assess individual fish growth and to determine the distribution of ages in the population. From that, we can estimate total animal mortality, or the portion of the population that dies every year. We also wanted to estimate exploitation, or how harvest impacts the population. And to do that, we had to tag some fish. So in 2014, 15, and 16, we tagged all the blue catfish that were at least 15 inches long with either a $25 or $100 reward tag. And the tagged returns from those fish were used to estimate exploitation. So during the 7-year study, we caught a little over 2,400 blue catfish. They range from about 10 to 46 inches. And we tagged almost 1,400 of those fish during 2014, 15, and 16. We aged 698 of those blue catfish. And from that, we learned that it takes about 6 or 7 years for blue catfish in Mark Twain to reach 20 inches long. We also learned that individual fish growth is very variable. A fish of the same age, so for example, 8-year-old blue catfish range in size from 16 all the way up to 30 inches long. Because we aged the fish, we could estimate the distribution of ages in the population. And from that, we can calculate the total animal mortality, which is the portion of the population that dies every year. And so we estimated that to be 25% for all fish that were at least 5 years old or older. Based on 297 tag returns, our estimate of exploitation, portion of the population harvested every year, was 8 to 12%. So using these exploitation rates and our total annual mortality rate, we can calculate the corresponding natural mortality, which would be 17 and 13%. Exploitation plus natural mortality equals total mortality. So now that we have all this good information, which took a lot of time and a lot of work to get about blue catfish in Mark Twain Lake, how do we use it to make catfish fishing better? The population structure of a fish population is determined by, meaning the numbers and size of the fish is determined by how many fish are added to the population each year, which we call recruitment, how fast the fish grow, how fast the fish die naturally, and how fast the fish die due to fishing, and how long the fish can live. So to manipulate the population to make fishing better, we have to alter one or more of these 5 variables. And the most effective and direct way for us to do this is to alter fishing mortality. And we alter fishing mortality with things like harvest restrictions, like length limits. Length limits change fishing mortality by changing the size or the age at which exploitation starts. But harvest regulations like length limits only work if harvest is high enough that it's noticeably impacting the population. So our question is 8 to 12% exploitation of blue catfish in Mark Twain noticeably impacting the population enough that we can alter that to make fishing better? So now we have good information on blue catfish growth, natural mortality, fishing mortality, and how long the fish can live. We used all of it in combination to predict how the population might respond to new harvest restrictions, specifically minimum length limits. So we used a computer simulation model to estimate the impact of 4 different minimum length limits, a 20-inch minimum length limit, 24, 26, and 30-inch minimum length limit, compared to a baseline length limit of 15 inches. Now, as I mentioned before, there is not currently a 15-inch length limit on blue catfish in Mark Twain Lake, but our data tells us that very few anglers keep blue catfish less than 15 inches long, so we're just using this as a basis for comparison. The output variables in our simulation model that we wanted to look at were first yield. Yield is the total amount of fish harvested by anglers. Yield is an important measure in fisheries that are harvest oriented, in fisheries where people like to keep fish to eat. Whenever you implement more restrictive harvest regulations in a fishery, the number of fish harvested is going to go down. But it's important to know by how much these harvest numbers decline. That's the second variable we're interested in looking at. And then the third one, output variable, was the number of fish at least 35 inches long in the population. This will give us an indication of how these length limits change the number of big fish in the population, because having a better opportunity to catch a large fish could be important to some anglers. So the numbers in this table represent the percent change from the baseline 15-inch minimum length limit. And a negative percent means a decline. So first, let's look at the impact of these length limits on yield. With a 20-inch minimum length limit, we can expect yield to go up a little bit, not very much, but up. With a 24-inch minimum length limit, yield could go up a little bit, but most importantly, it's not likely to go down. Yield could go up a little bit with a 26, or it could go down just a little bit with a 26-inch minimum length limit. And yield is much more likely to decline noticeably with a 30-inch minimum length limit. As I mentioned before, all these length limits cause the number of fish harvested to go down, and that decline gets higher with each increasing minimum length limit. A lot fewer fish would be harvested with a 30-inch length limit than with a 26, 24, or 20-inch length limit. In fact, a 30-inch length limit would probably cause the number of fish harvested to go down by about 70%. All these length limits increase the portion of large fish in the population. And any proportional increase goes up with each increasing length limit. Both the 24 and 26-inch length limits increase the number of large fish by 40% or more without impacting yield very much. I want to point out that we will be recommending the same minimum length limit for flat catfish as we do for blue catfish. Even though we couldn't catch enough flags to make a similar assessment, we are concerned about their density I think they could benefit from some additional conservation strategies and will likely respond in much the same way as blue catfish. It's important to also know that we do have a good channel catfish fishery in the reservoir too. We're not suggesting any changes to harvest regulations, though, for channel catfish. The current regulations allow anglers to keep 10 fish per day with no size limit, and they will continue to be able to do that going forward. So last winter, Fisheries Leadership then asked me to go out and get some public input on our recommendation for a minimum length limit on blue catfish and flat catfish in the lake. So we put together a public input committee and put together a plan and implemented that plan last summer. We collected this input in a couple of ways. First, we did plan to have a couple of face-to-face open meetings in the Mark Twain Lake area, but those were casualties of COVID. So all of our public input was collected either online or through the mail. So the first way we collected the input was we developed a page on our website where we put a recorded presentation, much like you're hearing today, narrated by Paul and myself about our study and the simulation results and our recommendations. Folks who go online and watch that presentation. We also put a brief Qualtrics survey on there where we asked them a few questions about their catfish fishing experiences at Mark Twain and their preferences for catfish fishing at Mark Twain. And then there was a place where they could leave brief comments. We also sent a similar survey to every angler that returned a tag to us from a blue catfish they caught in Mark Twain Lake. And that packet would include a brief cover letter explaining what we were doing. We included a one-page summary of our study and assessment and a survey. We did also do a live webcast one day last summer where folks could watch a similar presentation to what you're hearing today, narrated by Paul and myself live online, and they could send in questions for us to answer if they wanted to. So overall, we had 217 people respond to our online and mail survey combined. We asked them several questions in those surveys, but I'm only going to focus on the two that I think were most important and most informative. One question we asked them was, which is more important to you when fishing for catfish in Mark Twain Lake? Keeping catfish to eat or having an increased opportunity to catch a large catfish? In the online survey, 60% of them said having a good opportunity to catch a large catfish was more important, and 40% said keeping fish to eat was more important. Those results were a little bit different in the mail survey, where 33% indicated that having a good opportunity to catch large fish was more important, and 52% indicated that keeping catfish to eat was more important. Now, in the recorded presentation we had online, in the materials that we sent in our mail survey, and in our live webcast, we originally recommended the 24-inch minimum length limit based on the results of the computer simulations and what we thought we knew about our anglers. Turns out angler desires are a little bit different than we thought. I anticipated a clear preference for keeping catfish to eat. That really wasn't the case. At least a third of the anglers, maybe closer to half of them, indicating that having an increased opportunity to catch a big fish is just as important or more important than keeping catfish to eat. So it was the responses to this question that caused me to change my recommendation from a 24-inch minimum length limit to a 26-inch minimum length limit. We also asked them which of the 4 minimum length limits they felt best met their need for catfish fishing at Mark Twain Lake. In the online survey, the 24 and 26-inch minimum length limits gathered the most responses. This could be influenced a little bit by the fact that we said that we like the 24-inch minimum length limit the most in the recorded presentation and the live webcast and in our study summary. So that could have had some impact on these choices. It was a little bit different in the mail survey. Again, the 24-inch length limit was the most selected, but about a third of the anglers indicated they preferred no change at all. So in my final recommendation for a 26-inch minimum length limit, I considered the scientific information we collected during our assessment and the results of the simulation modeling and what the anglers told us about their catfish fishing preferences in Mark Twain Lake. A 26-inch minimum length limit is a good middle ground choice that balances desires of anglers that want to keep catfish to eat and those that want to have an increased opportunity to catch large catfish. The 26-inch minimum length limit should improve the number of large catfish by 50% or more while not impacting yield very much, which would be important to those who want to keep catfish to eat. And so the 26-inch minimum length limit for both blue catfish and flat catfish has been approved by the Regulations Committee for further consideration. And so if this is formally approved and when the time comes, we will have to communicate this to our anglers. We'll do that using the traditional ways. We'll make announcements and news releases on our MDC website. We certainly want to use social media. It worked very well when we announced our public input process. We put an announcement on our MDC Facebook page. Facebook angler groups picked that up and shared it. And there's one very popular one that focused on fishing at Mark Twain Lake. And I work with our media specialists to get some news releases out in the Northeast, primarily in the Northeast and St. Louis regions, where most of our anglers come from. And so with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
I have a quick question. Why is it that you're recommending this size limit at Mark Twain, and it's different than what you currently have at the Lake of the Ozarks and other locations?
Yep, that's a great question, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Yep, fish populations in different reservoirs are often very different. So at Lake of the Ozarks in Truman, where we've implemented a slot length limit for blue catfish, there's a very different population compared to what we have at Mark Twain. Slot length limits, like at Truman and Lake of the Ozarks, are designed to improve fisheries where you have very high density of small, slow-growing blue catfish, which they have, or had at least, at Lake of the Ozarks in Truman. That way you're shifting, and then you protect fish in the slot range, then allow some amount of harvest over the slot. That way you're trying to shift much of the harvest to the smaller fish to decrease their densities and improve their growth and eventually make some larger catfish. At Mark Twain, we don't have really high densities of small fish. We don't have near the number of fish that we have at Truman and Lake of the Ozarks. So a slot length limit would not be appropriate there. We actually want to decrease harvest of smaller fish, not increase it.
Okay, thank you.
Good question,
You're welcome.
sir. Any other questions? Where was it that we had the uproar when we went to that slot limit? Was that on Stockton or Truman?
That was at Truman.
When they got on the radio and hammered us and everything else. Okay, good presentation. We thank you. Andrew, you're up.
Thank you very much.
I think we've been sanitized. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, and Director Pauly. I'll be presenting item 7 on your agenda, the fiscal year 21 mid-year review. While presenting the mid-year review report, I will incorporate the information from the December 2020 financial summary for FY21 to give you a more thorough look at our financial position. December 2020 financial summary provides results from the first half of the fiscal year and is the basis for many of the trend assumptions in the mid-year review. So if you'll turn your attention to the FY21 mid-year review, the purpose of the review is to report the revenue and expenditure trends for the first half of the fiscal year and explain mid-year adjustments to those original estimates. So I'll begin with the revenue trends. On page 2 of your report, you will note the total revenues for fiscal year 2021 are generally categorized into 4 main sources: 60% from sales tax, 19% from permit sales, 16% from federal reimbursements, and 5% from other revenue sources. As of December 2020, total fiscal year-to-date revenues were 10.1% above fiscal year 20 and 9.1% above expectations. As we have experienced positive sales tax revenues as compared with the 1.2% original projected reduction from FY20 actual revenue. The forecast, originally forecasted due to the pandemic, we are adjusting sales tax revenue to be flat or 0% growth from FY20. All other revenue projections remain unchanged. This update to sales tax revenue estimated results in total revenue impact of 1.7% growth from FY20, an increase of 0.7% from the original 0.9%. And I'll continue to go quickly, so if you have any questions, please let me know. First revenue category is conservation sales tax. For the first half of FY 2020, FY 2021, conservation sales tax revenues were 4.6% above the first half of 2020 and 8.7% above expectations. The original budget for FY 21 assumed a 1.2% decline in sales tax. Based on the current trends, we have adjusted sales tax revenue conservatively at a flat or 0% growth from FY 20. As of today's revenue numbers, which is January 21st, MDC sales tax revenue is 3.3% above fiscal year 20, and total sales tax for the state were 2% above fiscal year 20. Next revenue category is permit sales. For the first half of fiscal year 21, permit sales were 22.7% above fiscal year 20 and 14.1% above expectations. The original growth projected for FY 21 was 10.8 or 10.5% above FY 20 actual. The increased revenue projection was based on permit restructuring for non-resident and trout permits. While we have experienced permit growth in FY 21, most of the increase was anticipated, and the majority of the permit restructuring for non-resident permits were impacted in the fall hunting season. Therefore, no adjustment is proposed to permit sales revenue to maintain a growth factor of 10.5% above fiscal year 20. We will continue to monitor the FY 20 for the FY 22 projection. The next revenue category is federal reimbursements. Federal funds represents the reimbursement Missouri earns from federal grants for conservation projects and activities. For fiscal year 21 through December of 20, federal reimbursements were 9% above reimbursements in fiscal year 20 and 2.2% above expectations. Timing of these reimbursements accounts for most of the difference in claims compared to previous years. Due to the stabilization of trends in federal reimbursements for fiscal year 21, no adjustment is proposed to achieve a net growth of 0.3% above fiscal year 20 actual. Final revenue category represents the remaining other revenues. Other sources of revenue include sales, rentals, interest, contractual services, donations, insurance reimbursement, settlements, and refunds. For the first half of fiscal year 21, other revenues were 28.2% above fiscal year 20 and 9.1% above expectations. Growth of these other revenues are quite volatile based on the variability of timber sales and donations. For this reason, no adjustment is proposed to adjust the estimated 3.3% reduction from actual revenue growth in fiscal year 20. Next, I'll turn to expenditure trends. On page 7 of your report, you will note that total expenditures for fiscal year 21 can be categorized into 4 main areas: 51% budgeted for personal services, 39% for expense and equipment, 9% for construction, and 1% for land conservation and partnerships. As of December 2020, total fiscal year to date expenditures were 3.5% below the first half of fiscal year 20 and 12.5% below expectations. Department conducted the mid-year review of expenditures to determine the correct level of spending and redirect funds to strategic goals. For the review of fiscal year 21, a 0.2% reduction is proposed to total expenditures from original estimates, resulting in a net increase of 10.8% from fiscal year 20. The adjustments will be discussed in more detail in the appropriate expenditure category. The first category is personal services. Personal services expenditures include salaried positions, hourly staff, and accompanying benefits. For the first half of fiscal year 21, personal service expenditures were 1.7% below fiscal year 20 and 7.5% below original expectations. As the director mentioned in her opening statement, we'll be working on filling these staff positions and hopefully reduce some of this variance. Based on the mid-year review, a very slight decrease is proposed to hourly or increase to hourly labor that does not equate to a percentage change in personal service expenditures for a net growth of 6.2% from actual fiscal year 20. The next expenditure category is expense and equipment. Together, expenses and equipment are budgeted at 39% of total expenditures. For the first half of fiscal year 21, expense and equipment expenditures together were 3.1% above fiscal year 20 and 17.2% below expectations. Individually, expenses were 16.2% below FY20 and 21.8% below original expectations. Expenditures for equipment were 256.6% above fiscal year 20 and 2.9% above original expectations. Please note, most of the equipment variance from fiscal year 20 was anticipated based on the final payment for the helicopter. Based on the mid-year review, a 0.3% increase is proposed for expenditures for expense and equipment combined for net growth of 17.7% from fiscal year 20. Individually, the mid-year review resulted in a proposed shift from expenses to equipment. This shift will decrease the expense budget 2.1% and increase the equipment budget 14.9%. Final expenditure category is capital improvements. Capital improvements include construction and land conservation and partnerships. For the first half of fiscal year 20, capital expenditures were 24.5% below fiscal year 20 and 21.6% below original expectations. Based on the trends of capital improvements during mid-year review, a 2.5% decrease is proposed for capital improvements budget from the original estimate. The rate of reduction equates to 11.3% net growth from the actual FY20 expenditures. Individually, construction expenditures for the first half of fiscal year 21 were 20% below fiscal year 20 and 17.2% below expectations. The mid-year review resulted in a proposed decrease to construction of 15.5% from the original estimate. The details for the construction reductions will be addressed in more detail in the Infrastructure Management Chief's presentation immediately following this report. Land conservation and partnership expenditures for the first half of fiscal year 21 were 55.7% below fiscal year 20 and 53.1% below expectations. The mid-year review resulted in proposed increase to land conservation and partnerships of 77.8% from the original estimated amount. Summary of the mid-year adjustments has been provided on page 11 of your report. And this concludes my remarks, and hopefully I didn't go too fast for you today.
Any questions, commissioners? Andrew, thank you.
Thank you.
As always, good work. Looks to me like Jacob is
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Board of Commissioners, Director Polly. Here you go, Alan. So today I'm going to be sharing highlights with you of the mid-year review of construction projects that are in your advanced materials. So far in this fiscal year, we have completed 12 major construction projects. There are 16 active construction projects that total $11 million. We've expended over $9.3 million through the first half of the fiscal year. That is below the original projections to hit $27.9 million, and the construction expenditures were revised downward to $24 million for the year. I'm going to spend a little bit of time just highlighting a few projects that were completed in this last fiscal year, or in the first half of the fiscal year. The first one is BK Leach. It's a well replacement project. You see in the middle of this picture here, the old well. To the right is the distribution, to the right is the control panel platform, and to the left is the distribution piping. When the well was first installed, it produced approximately 3,000 gallons per minute. Over time, the well production declined to less than 800 gallons per minute before it eventually failed. So the work includes drilling a new well on the opposite side of the distribution piping and then decommissioning the old well in accordance with DNR regulations. Here you see the well test, and it was very successful. The new well yields over 3,300 gallons per minute, so area staff are very pleased with the results. And here you see the contractor putting the finishing touches on their work. The next project I'm going to highlight for you that was completed in the first half of the fiscal year was an HVAC system replacement at the St. Louis Regional Office. It included replacement of original heating and cooling equipment that was nearly 25 years old. The project objectives included sustaining system function prior to major component failure, improving system function through automated controls, and then improved energy efficiency. As you will see through these slides, a commercial HVAC system is much more complicated than what you might be familiar with on a residential HVAC system. On the left is the original cooling tower as part of the air conditioning system. On the right is the new cooling tower. On the left, you see the original water heater and the boilers. On the right, you see the new water heater and the new boilers. Little close-up of those boilers, it almost looks sci-fi-ish, if you will. The lights indicate system status. So green light is good, everything works properly. Blue light, you can tell that that's an indication that there's something not quite right, but it's still functioning. This picture is from the punch list inspection. So the contractor then had to work to make sure that that boiler unit got fully operational. Here you see a pressure tank installation and all the water distribution plumbing for the heating and cooling system. Here's some of the air handling equipment that was installed connected to the existing ductwork. Quite an extensive amount of work went into this project. The contractor did well. Even had to work through a couple of office closures due to COVID-19, but they successfully completed the project. Next project I'm going to highlight is Headwaters Access. It's a boat ramp renovation. Work for this project includes complete replacement of the entrance road, parking lot, and boat ramp on the popular access just south of Cape Girardeau. Here you see the site plan from the construction drawings, just giving you orientation of the site and the extent of the work. Here's the completed new parking lot with I-55 in the background. And this is the upper half of the boat ramp, the new boat ramp. You see staff there that participated in the final inspection. That's Chris Kennedy on the left in his former role as Fisheries Regional Supervisor, and then Matt Deckard was the construction inspector on the project. And this view gives you a sense of the large fluctuations that we have to design for on river levels for boat accesses that are in close proximity to our major rivers. Remember, in the previous slide, the two individuals were standing in the upper half of that boat ramp, and it shows you just how far down those boat ramps need to go to accommodate the various water levels as the rivers rise and fall. The last project I'm going to share with you is the Honeywell Lake Sediment Basin renovation. Work for this project focused on making improvements to the function of the sedimentation basin located just to the north of the bend in the road depicted here. Upland stormwater runoff from the north is captured in the sedimentation basin. As the stormwater is slowed down, sediment settles out in the basin before the stormwater travels through the outflow structure and into Honeywell Lake that starts just south of the road. This view is prior to construction starting. It's the road that was depicted on the previous slide. To the right is the sedimentation basin, and to the left would be the start of Honeywell Lake. You can see here that over time, the accumulated sediment reduced the storage capacity of the basin. The original project concept was to remove the accumulated sediment and place it as fill in other places on the conservation area. After careful consideration of various factors, including mitigation costs and hauling costs, the project team proposed an alternative solution. And that solution involved raising the road and the water control structure 3 feet to gain additional storage capacity. This resulted in much lower project costs, much quicker timeline, and much less impact to the vegetation and other features that had established within the sedimentation basin. Here you see the inside of the water control structure. And there's the finished project. That concludes my remarks. In the interest of time, I will not go through the regular status report on individual projects that are in your advanced materials, but I'm happy to answer any questions the commissioners may have about projects on those advanced materials.
How about it, commissioners? Any questions of Jake?
Not for me.
No, I'm fine. Thank you.
Okay, and I think Mark has a problem with his muting again.
I've asked him to chat any questions, but Mark, I'm not seeing any questions yet.
Jacob, thank you. Appreciate
You're
it.
welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Jacob.
Team. Good work. Doug's up next.
Well, good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Director. Be providing a brief update on the mid-year report for IT today. I'm going to start off with talking about a few of the completed projects. The first is that you're seeing screenshots of here is the mobile application for CWD data collection that we implemented this last fall. We rolled it out on iPhones to all 72 sampling stations for the November 2020 firearms deer season. The screenshot you see here from left to right show the login screen. Got an echo.
Okay.
We can hear you, Mark.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Well, I just went to a different computer.
Doug, please do.
Will do. The screenshots you see here are the login screen, the initial sample collection screen, and the screen where completed samples are ready to submit to the central database. Feedback was overwhelmingly positive on the new tools provided this fall. The next project I'd like to highlight is the Wetland Management Support Tool. The tool allows area wetland managers to make more informed decisions on the water levels in the wetlands that they manage. The screens shown here are the main entry page, where they enter various data about the pools and structures they're working on. And the one on the right shows one of the charts available to them that it graphs out the previous gate on water levels on a given date. The project streamlines a routine process they use and provides historical data for longer-term analysis. Last fall, we also completed the replacement of the audiovisual system here in the Commission Headquarters Auditorium. The team installed a video wall system, a new integrated podium with a confidence monitor, a large monitor for the back of the room that can also be used for confidence, as well as used separately when the room is divided, and a new control booth for staff who manage live or recorded events. Now, FY21 is the final year of a 6-year program to replace and modernize all audiovisual systems across the state. And I want to share a few brief pictures of that program over the last 6 years. What you see here are a couple of the 7 large video wall systems that we completed at nature centers and, of course, here at the auditorium around the state. The program has also completed 14 dual cart systems that you see in the photo on the left, where basically the 2 carts are twinned or paired so that you get the same content at the same time, allows you to have better viewing experience for the audience, as well as more people can attend. And the program has also seen completion of 12 single cart systems like the one on the right there, where a Little Acorns program is being given. And last, the program has also seen implementation of 17 wall or ceiling mounted systems in conference rooms around the state. This was a very large program over those 6 years, and lots of good work from IT staff, many folks from the former Design and Development Division, now Infrastructure Management, and Education, Communication, various other folks all collaborated well on this very highly successful program. Moving on to highlights, one more project completed this last fall is the Strategic Planning Management Tool. The tool provides the department a single place for helping to manage the strategic plan and all the associated elements of that plan, including outcomes and strategies, performance measures, and actions. First release of this tool allowed the department to enter and make updates to these various strategic plan elements. For example, the screenshot you see here is the main page for measures, and it lists all of the performance measures that are currently loaded into the tool. From there, staff can then review or update various information about each performance measure. And from there, this last screenshot shows one of the 39 measure visualizations that staff have loaded in the tool to date. The team is currently working on an enhancement to the tool to add functionality that would allow staff to enter and manage program objectives, work plans, and operational performance measures. A brief touch on some of the maintenance and operations work we do here. The highlights you see here do represent, of course, just a small portion of what we do to keep the IT lights on for the department. From responding to over 3,700 help desk calls, to processing over 200 purchase requests, and to the deployment of over 800 pieces of IT equipment. For my last item, I'd like to share about one of the many behind-the-scenes technology systems that IT supports. The remote login system allows staff who are not in the office to log in safely into the internal MDC network and perform their computer-based work as if they were in the office. You can see by the chart that prior to the pandemic, we had about 30 staff who on average used this system on any given day. That peaked quickly in April up to 436, bringing to probably the height of the rush, if you will, as it relates to the pandemic in April. And since then, we've averaged about 360 connections every day over the last several months. This is one of the many enabling technologies the IT branch provides. And of course, it's allowed the department staff to continue to perform their work safely while teleworking during the pandemic. I want to give just a very brief shout out to all the IT staff and to our consultants that we engage, as well as the many staff from other branches who have helped with all of these projects and collaborated with IT in many, many ways. And with that, I'd be happy to entertain any comments or questions.
Any questions, commissioners?
Can you hear me?
No, not for me, Chairman.
Don?
None?
Don?
Doug, you guys have got a big job. Thank you for all you're doing. We
Mr.
appreciate it.
Chairman, I think Mark has a question. Commissioner
Oh, I'm
McKinnon?
sorry.
First thing, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay, well, that's good. I've switched over to an iPad here. I guess I'm feeling pretty good now, Doug. I was going to be a little more critical here for a second, but I guess we're back on track. So anyway, let's hope we can get this thing worked out. I'm trying to learn like we all are to get this thing. So I know you're working hard to make it all happen. So anyway, thank you very much.
You bet. I understand. We'll work to make things a little smoother next time.
All right. Appreciate it.
very good. Thank you, Mark. Glad you're back with us. I think the last item number 10, is an action item on the part of our Deputy Director, Jennifer. Where are you, Jennifer?
I'm here.
We
I'm
want to
thinking-
all join in wishing you a happy birthday tomorrow.
Ah,
I understand
Thank you.
tomorrow's a big day.
it is a big day.
Yeah, well,
Happy birthday.
congratulations for making it.
I'm glad I made it. It was a tough year to make it, that's for sure.
No kidding.
We're very glad you made it.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much. Very thoughtful. I appreciate it. So yes, I have the next two action items, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. The first is an action item to address some boundary confusion that we have at our Canaan Conservation Area. So the Realty Committee is recommending approval to exchange approximately 25 acres of the Canaan Conservation Area in Gasconade County for a 15-acre tract with some adjacent landowners who will compensate the department for the difference in the appraised values of the land being exchanged. I offer that for your consideration, Mr. Chairman.
Fellow commissioners, this is an action item. Can I have a motion to that effect?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
And second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Motion
Aye.
carried. Thank you.
All
Next,
right. Yes, sir. Next is a similar issue to resolve some boundary and encroachment issues at our Caps Creek Conservation Area in Newton County, requesting approval to exchange approximately 1.64 acres for approximately 4 acres and 3.6 acres, respectively.
So moved.
may I have a
Second.
motion?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, likewise. Motion carries. Thank you, Jennifer. And
Thank you.
Thank you,
again,
Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commissioners.
I think that's all of the action items that we have on the agenda. I would like to back up to the Reg Committee report. Mike, if you're still there.
Yes, sir, Commissioner.
I want the commission to go on record today to thank of the participants in bringing this forward. I know you work closely with people from the Department of Ag. We had the deer breeders, all of the hunting people, or not all of them, but organizations. And it was it points out what we can do when we work together. We come up with a good product. And if you would, please, on behalf of the commission, thank those participants.
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. Certainly couldn't have happened without great cooperation and good staff and good folks on all sides of the issue.
Well, it's been a good meeting, a good 2 days. I want to thank the commissioners for participation, the good questions, and thank the staff for good presentations and a lot of hard work. So I guess unless someone has something else to bring up, this will conclude our meeting. Anything you have, Barry?
No, sir.
What about you, Steve?
No, sir.
How about you, Mark?
No, I'm glad we got through the last couple days, so it's a challenge, but no, good reports and appreciate everybody's efforts to keep things moving and welcome to 2021. Let's see how this year looks for us.